All right, I think we're live at this point, fellas. People can hear us. Don't say anything too horrible, um, and anything too cancelable. Let's say, especially you, Micah. All right, so let's get into the show. Well, hey everyone, welcome to the Wonkcast. As Micah has already nicknamed the show, this is Three Wonks. Of course, we've got myself, Micah Irfan, and Socialism Done Left at the bottom there, missing his camera. Who would do that? Come to a podcast without a camera? Unbelievable. Today, we're going to introduce the show, talk about the state of the 2024 race for the White House. We're going to then talk about the recently elected Javier Milei's government in Argentina, the bad and maybe even the good. Are there some good things that this anarcho-capitalist is doing in Argentina? Unbelievable. And then we'll wrap up with a super duper nerdy discussion of our preferred voting system. That'll be very fun for all the very wonky people in the audience. And just some housekeeping stuff. So we encourage you all to join the Discord, the Reddit, and of course become Patreon members. But fair warning, we're developing those platforms as we speak. But eventually we'll settle on things like Patreon benefits, Discord roles, Reddit flares, things like that. It's just we didn't have time to really fully get everything ironed out on those platforms. So become a member. It's a bit of the Wild West at this point. But we'll ban anyone who is a right winger. I guess basically it'll be our general rule going forward. So to introduce the show itself, let's break the fourth wall, and we're going to introduce, I guess, the concept of the show a bit, and go into it. This will be the only time we hopefully talk on a meta level, unless there's some big dramatic breakup of the crew. But this is our first show, so I'll start with how the show got started. So basically, I was bored with some free time, and it seems like when I find myself with free time, I fill it with just assorted nonsense. So I figured a super nerdy podcast with a couple wonky people would be fun. I wanted it to be me, a social democrat, a socialist, and then a center-left liberal type to represent sort of the left spectrum on issues. Unfortunately, we do not have representation from the Jimmy Dore tanky left, but I honestly couldn't think of anybody who was a really wonky policy person. So unfortunately,
smart.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, we will be missing that perspective on a regular basis for anyone who's disappointed. So maybe there's another podcast
yearned
out there.
for our K-High representative. If only we could get.
I mean, maybe Infrared will be a guest one day. You never know. But anyway, so in general, this podcast is going to focus on current events, politics, economics, policy, and just various things that come up on the spot. It'll be hopefully a bit of a good back and forth. And then we'll start now with just introductions to who we all are, in case anyone doesn't know. Obviously, the small starting audience. But to introduce myself, I'm not sure why, but I was into politics and economics at a very young age. I think I started probably doing, let's say, politics and policy research when I was about 11, just Googling things around, probably on the first wave of Obama's first election campaign. And I parlayed that into studying politics and economics in undergrad, ended up with a master's in finance and then another master's in economics. And currently I'm a finance professional working in the industry. I've worked in, formal and informal capacities, researching various economic issues for public and private entities, campaigns. And then, of course, I started the Econoboy YouTube channel where, I still stream and make content and whatnot. And throughout the time, my views on economics and policy continued to evolve to where I ended up today, where I describe myself as essentially just a progressive social democrat. And so that's me. Let's move on to Micah. Introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, how'd you get into politics, and what are you working on, Micah? What's your
Hello,
resume?
everybody. It's a similar story. It's a similar story for me. I was reading papers on North Korean state-owned enterprises when I was about 15 years old. My parents asked me, Micah, what are you reading? And I told them the title of the paper, and they said, and at that moment I knew that I was a dork and a nerd, and I was not going to have very many friends, except for faceless people on the internet like Econoboy and SDL. So I went to school. I'm studying economics now at the University of Houston. I am on the leadership committee of a center-left grassroots organization called the Center for New Liberalism. I'm a editor for a magazine called the Vital Center, trying to renew liberalism and bring it up to date with the 21st century. I am a former campaign manager and a former program consultant. I like to say I'm an organizer by day and wonk by night, except as you can see right now, it's not really night. So I'm a wonk by day sometimes and an organizer by day. other times.
There you go. SDL, same thing. Introduce yourself. How'd you get into politics? What are you working on now that's politics related, I guess? And, what brings you here, SDL?
Yeah, I guess probably similar story here. Yeah, pretty young, got into politics. Did it probably through high school debate, and that's where the tradition of the extremely long document with a million sources in it began. The stinky right winger fact sheet or whatever, the thing that I just put all of my like studies in. That's how it started in debate, because you cut these things called cards. You put like a source name, you put a little attribution of how to find the source, and you put a big long block of text. And that's exactly the exciting experience you'll find if you go to sockdonleft.github.io/srf. But yeah, I consider myself a socialist, specifically a market socialist. So a step or two left of a Conaboy. I'm a member of the Democratic Socialist of America. So definitely several steps left of Micah. In the DSA, the DSA is large, and I'm on the right side of DSA, so to speak. I'd write in like 14 million quotes because I consider my strategy better than the people on the quote unquote left. But without getting into details, I'm a member of the DSA. And currently not any really big projects aside from online stuff and furthering my personal education. That's about it.
There we go. Well, that's the team, everyone. Those are the three of us. Hopefully we can stick it out, come up with some good episodes, be a little bit topical. Maybe our next episode, it might be after the Iowa caucus in 2024, which is going to potentially be a pretty good topic. Who knows how that'll turn out, but that brings us to our first topic, which is the 2024 presidential race. And I guess, the Senate race and House races, whatever might come up. Joe Biden is currently sitting at a 39% approval rating. That's according to the 538 average. Donald Trump is getting kicked off state ballots, but he is currently dominating the Republican primary, and the polls for the general election show Biden facing a potential loss should the election be held today. So I wanted to start out with this, just to clarify. I figured we might literally all be in the same exact scenario here. Did all of us support Bernie in 2020, then vote Biden in 2020, and then plan to vote for Biden again in 2024? That's me. What about you guys?
That's me, but Micah might be the odd one out.
Yeah, I didn't support Bernie in 2020. I did meet Bernie, and I thought he was a nice guy, but I was not a Bernie. I was an apprehensive Pete Buttigieg supporter. Probably.
No,
apprehensive.
Nowadays, if I I was a little bit doubtful. I was skeptical of some of his ideas, but I thought he was a really smart guy. I maintain that. The guy speaks like 11 languages. Nowadays, if I could go back, I'd probably be a Bennett bro. For various reasons. Michael
Senator
Bennett
from Colorado.
Michael Bennett, not the most electable. Like Joe Biden was the most electable. Michael Bennett was very underrated, folks.
If you're gonna say Michael Bennett, you might as well just say John Delaney at that point, Micah.
Well, so here's the difference, right? Michael Bennett supports ranked choice voting. Michael Bennett's entire platform was about helping poor people. That's why he lost. Because primary voters are not poor people. They're the richer folks. That's why that we talk about student debt relief and not expanding the child tax credit and the EITC and food stamps, right? And so that was not a very winning message. And also, he's not necessarily the most charismatic person in the world. But I maintain that he probably would have been one of the better presidential choices.
Maybe one day it'll be Michael Bennett, John Delaney, Pres VP. And I think John Delaney will be our most jacked VP if that ever does happen.
Low bar, but I think he would be. Have you seen that man?
He's jacked. I'm telling you, he's got some muscles on him. He's on that Jeff Bezos style look. He bald on top, but he's jacked. That's the best thing you can do when you're a bald
for drinking the blood of children. I think we should all be federally funded blood of children. I think at least.
If you got jacked for drinking children's blood, then Biden should be a fucking professional bodybuilder at this point, right? So, all right. Well, okay. Well, we're not exactly quite in the same boat there. Micah, filthy centrist, says he's a Michael Bennett stan in 2020, but apparently, we all plan on voting for Biden, I guess, in 2024. And so, I guess transitioning to the Republican primary, is there? What do you guys think? Is there literally any realistic chance that it's not just a Biden and Trump rematch? And is that desirable? Like, if we could pick different candidates, who would we pick out of the Republican primary field and out of the depth chart of the Democrats to be the matchup in 2024, if we could?
Christie, baby. I mean, there's absolutely no chance. I think
No, I mean,
Ronna McDaniel, the entire Republican Party establishment has been very clear that they're not going to try to rig the game in favor of Nikki Haley, and that's the only way she'd ever make it through.
yeah, I mean, Chris Christie is probably your best bet, like a blue state, red Republican governor. But
I don't know. I mean, like Nikki Haley, she seems to be making some gains in these early states. Like she's polling a pretty close second place, I think, in like New Hampshire. I think she's polling pretty well, obviously, in South Carolina, where that's her home state. I mean, is there a chance that, because that's kind of what happens sometimes, right? Is that you rack up strong performances in these early states, and that swings the polls. Is there no chance? Like Trump might get fucking convicted or some shit in the middle of this. Like, is there no chance that Trump isn't the nominee?
I think that helps him. I think that helps.
You
him.
think
I mean,
getting convicted
honestly,
helps him? Jesus.
Oh, with the Republican primary voters, absolutely. I mean,
got some street cred now after getting convicted.
There's a reason why some people are talking about this. We have a bunch of lazy journalists which wanted a competitive primary story because Ron DeSantis was polling better in the past. He capsized. She's not doing that great. She's polling at 17% nationally amongst Republicans. Ron DeSantis at 17.8. Trump is like he still has a majority. We've never had a Republican primary that's been this uncompetitive and somebody else has won. That'd be a crazy upset. And I think it's really, honestly, it's like nothing's impossible, right? We're epistemologically barred.
Anything's possible.
Absolutely knowing anything. But it is extraordinarily, it's as likely to me that Nikki Haley becomes the nominee as like Dean Phillips becomes the nominee.
Yeah, I think the only realistic chance Trump loses is that he like trips and falls and dies. Like I don't think there's any political process by which someone else is rising. Like in that 538, just like Micah said, Nikki Haley's about doing as well as DeSantis, and they're both at like 17%. And maybe they rise up. I think that's roughly where like Bernie was at around the first primaries. There's a chance, but Bernie was like a uniquely popular candidate in the way that Trump was a uniquely popular candidate, like feeding meat to the base of that party. And I just don't think that like Nikki Haley, the more neoconservative approach that she's really leaning on, or Ron DeSantis with leaning on like, I don't know, hating trans people, just seems to be getting it. They want the racism. They want the racism, and that's Trump.
Like my prediction is
they want Orange Man.
Well, I think that the Republican primary is going to get wrapped up actually pretty soon. Because I agree with you guys largely. I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate. Like I think that Haley has a very, very small chance of winning basically any of the early states, and I think especially Haley, like she's going to lose her home state, and that's typically like a knockout blow for anyone's election. Like, Warren dropped out after she lost Massachusetts. Rubio dropped out after losing Florida. Like, if you lose your home state, I mean, what are you really going to win, right? And South Carolina is a pretty early state. Haley's probably focusing a lot of her resources there, and in New Hampshire. Like, if she ends up losing like 50 to 25 to Trump, I feel like she drops out. And then after that, it's like, is DeSantis really going to stay in until Florida and then just lose Florida? Like, he'll probably drop out as well. And then what are you left with, right?
It looks like New Hampshire is the state that she should win because it's open primary. There's so many independents. It's a more libertarian, like anti-Trump state. She looks like she's going to lose. Like the fact that we're even talking about how she could win, we're relying on bad polls, which she'll often show her behind. And like we're assuming Chris Christie's going to drop out. All of this just to win one state that has barely any electoral votes, when we know she's going to walk into a catastrophe in every other state. So I think it's Jover. It's Jover for them.
It's
Orange Man.
Something worth considering is that in the Democratic primary, it's roughly proportional representation. Like there's a little bit of fiddling with it. There's still the super delegates, but it's roughly proportional representation, like STV is. Like, so we'll be talking about in like half an hour. But in the Republican primary, my understanding is that every state is winner takes all. So unless she's like 50% or above, that's it. It doesn't matter. So
yeah, it's a really weird system. I guess to be fair, like all the primaries are kind of weird. Like it should why aren't the primaries just all on the same day? It should be stupid. Just put all the primaries on the same day and then make it ranked choice and just do that, right? But we have this weird fucking system of primaries. I don't know why, because primaries can be anything we want them to be. The parties just choose.
The only argument I could see for staggering primaries is that maybe it lets you see a candidate's speaking ability or campaigning ability or whatever, applied in practice for new candidates. But aside from that, like ranked choice vote all in one day, I would want to see it something like over 2 months or something. Instead, it's like this year-long drag out. But
What I'm saying, just
Yeah,
make all the
I can see,
primaries
I can
make
see,
every
like,
primary
it's like,
June 1st.
yeah, cut them off.
Yeah, fuck you, Micah.
well, I think you can like regionally test it. Like I think that you could split the country into like 5 different regions, and then you rotate it like each cycle, and like they go and they start out there, and like that's the area where they can campaign, because they can't campaign nationwide really sustainably. Like they get a bunch of extra attention, and then they go nationally. I guess that'd probably be better than what we have. But like Iowans, like F these guys. These guys get way too much attention.
That's true. Who gives a shit about
Iowans
Iowans?
and New Hampshireans.
Isn't that what happened with like? So there's this whole controversy that like isn't it like no one's appearing on the New Hampshire ballot, something along those lines, or some state. I know in Florida, the Democrats basically rigged it in favor of Joe Biden, and I'm not trying to say that lightly, but like the committee apparently maybe didn't understand.
And they're not having a primary.
No, it's because the Democratic Party. So New Hampshire, I don't know why New Hampshire thinks that it can pretend that it has the ability to make this rule. New Hampshire says we're the first primary. That's what we decided. But then the Democratic Party is like, well, actually, you're just kind of a cog in the machine of the Democratic primary. We can actually organize our primaries however the fuck we want. That's when this movement to make South Carolina the first primary kind of comes out ahead, where I think the Democratic Party like voted to make South Carolina the first primary, but then New Hampshire was like, well, we're just not going to have a primary if we're not first.
In defense,
and it's like, well, who gives a shit about you anyway?
Also a law is my understanding is that it was a law that they had to be the first primary. And
no, it's a law. No, but STL, it's a law in New Hampshire. Like New Hampshire says, our law says we have to be first, and it's like, well, why do we care about that? You're some stupid ass state nobody gives a fuck about.
The New Hampshire Democratic Party, the argument they gave is like, oh, our hands are just tied. We have to be the first. And like, I don't know whether that's actually true, but like, that's the argument they made.
It's so stupid. Like we could make.
I think it's absolutely cope. And you know, it's really funny that South Carolina is the first one. I mean, it makes sense. The current DNC chair is Jamie Harrison. He ran for Senate in South Carolina. He's in South Carolina. And Jim Clyburn, Joe Biden, they all had vested interest in it becoming first. But yeah, they're just coping.
Well, it's also like it appeals to me, the argument that South Carolina is like a better representation, not only of the base of the Democratic Party, but also like who's most likely to win the primary. Because currently in Democratic Party politics, it seems like basically unless you can get a huge proportion of black people to vote for you, you're just not going to win a national Democratic primary. Like that's been the story of like the last 20 or 30 years of Democratic politics, is like, who do black people in these southern states vote for? Because you win the whole South, and that's a huge advantage, right? Bill Clinton, Joe Biden, Obama and Hillary were pretty competitive on the black vote, but that's one of the reasons Obama was actually able to win that in a pretty big upset, was because he was competitive with the black community against Hillary. And so, yeah, like making South Carolina first kind of makes sense. Like, who cares what all these fucking white corn farmers in Iowa think? Like, it's pretty much, you know, black and Hispanic people are kind of the base of the Democratic Party.
I think it's definitely better than Iowa. I think ideally you'd pick the first primary state, if we're going to do this, as a state that represents like the actual demographics of the ideal Democratic coalition that we're pursuing, and we put it into swing state, so all that campaign time actually might yield us some votes in the general election. So that'd probably be like a Michigan.
Wait, you know what I'm hearing? Hold on, Micah. You know what I'm hearing? What's the state that's pretty fucking diverse and represents like a pretty broad swath of Democratic base? We both know the answer, Micah.
Texas.
It's Texas. Texas should be the first primary.
God.
But it's not a swing state yet. Like they could do that in like 4 years.
Texas is a swing state. Micah, you were posting Biden 2024 is going to win Texas. We're a swing state nowadays, baby.
If we can get our turnout up and we can get our party institution working to get Latino turnout at the same area where African American turnout is, then we are swing state, or we might just be a total blue state. But until that happens, it's gonna be tough. But a man can dream.
Gotta have hope,
the Blexus is what we're working for.
I guess the take I always had is that the simplest way to do the starting states, so let's say you do something like Micah's and you divide into 10, 10, 10, 10, five sets. The first 10 should just be the 10 swingiest states. And like, that's it. And then just do the next 10, the next
That's
10,
actually
the next
such
10,
a
the
good
next 10.
point.
Yeah, like just do it by how close it was in the last 5 elections or whatever.
The only thing is, like, at a certain point, like the last bunches might not even matter because like it might be decided already. But I suppose like, it's just going to be being the last 10 is always like you're just going to kind of be waiting for the inevitable to happen. In most cases.
Yeah, but I think that's all right if those the last states are all going to be like the hyper blue states. Like if I don't know, I take very heavily like the actually being able to win elections concern. And so if swing state voters like you, which doesn't always like from a left or right perspective, that's not always clearly like the centrist wins or the left winger wins or whatever. It's usually people who can like get out the base in a new way, which was Bernie Sanders in 2016, but not in 2020. So I don't know. That would be the general take I'd have. Put the swingier ones forward. That probably leans towards a more centrist bias, but it also leads towards like a getting uninvolved voters involved type bias.
We haven't answered the second question, which was Micah kind of said, he said maybe a preferred Republican would be Chris Christie. If I had to pick of all the Republicans running, that's a fucking real tough one. I guess Chris Christie might be my preferred one amongst the Republicans. What about you?
I mean, who else? Like Vivek?
Yeah, I don't know. Would you agree, Esty? Is Chris Christie the harm reduction Republican?
I think Chris Christie is the harm reduction Republican, and Vivek is the accelerationist. Okay, he's
harm increasing Republican.
He's the Posadist one. Like we put him in charge so that he creates the conditions for revolution. Okay.
Well, more interestingly, like what about the Democratic side? Is Joe Biden our ideal candidate? Let's forget about like name recognition, incumbency. Like in terms of policy, is Joe Biden our preferred candidate? Like, or would we pick somebody different?
I think even Micah sounds like he wanted to pick someone to Biden's left, like Buttigieg, for example. But
I don't know about that. I don't know. Like I think Biden was the best pick in terms of actually getting stuff done. In terms of like actual policy platforms, I don't know. Like Biden's kind of protectionist, right? And like his immigration policy is, it's. So I suppose if we really thought about it, we could probably find some better folks. But you have to be, your practical ability is what's most important. And Biden got more passed than I imagine any other Democrat would in his position.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I guess in terms of pure policy, it's a tough one for me. I've always been a big fan of Elizabeth Warren, and I would have voted for her in the 2020 primary, but she just had like no shot of winning Texas. So I was like, I'll go ahead and vote for Bernie. But I will say, like, I was very surprised. Like, I thought Joe Biden would just be a lot more milquetoast, like moderate bullshit type president, but he's actually ended up like he's really, like, people say every Democratic president's the most progressive president of their lifetime, but he's really done a lot more than I thought he would do, right? And that's a pleasant surprise. So in terms of replacing him, like, I don't know. Like, obviously, I would say in terms of pure policy, maybe like a Katie Porter or Ro Khanna would be better. Which, triggers the shit out of Micah, but whatever, who gives a shit what Micah thinks? But what about you, SDL? Who would you pick?
We could have like if we could have just flipped Joe Biden and someone like Bernie Sanders, I think you would have seen like there's definitely marginal cases where a more left-wing president would have been better. Like the strike on the railroads, right? That would have been an example where they wouldn't have forced on the bad deal. They might have forced on like the mediocre deal, and then that would have given more room to negotiate for better. Like what happened?
Well, I feel like the deal was pretty good. I guess I'd have to relook over it, but I feel like Biden got a pretty reasonable deal done. Do you know?
The deal that they put in, my understanding is that it didn't have any of the sick days, and it didn't have some of the limits to the scheduled railroading that they want to do. So like they were still, my understanding is reductions in how many people were on trains and so on. But I guess the broader point is that I don't know that were it say like a Sanders president or even a Warren president, that they would have forced the strike to shut down at all. Like it's possible they would have, or it's possible they would have forced a deal that disbenefited the corporations. So there's marginal examples on domestic policy. There's immigration policy, obviously, which like Like Mayorkas, like initially it seemed like Biden and Mayorkas were really pushing for a major change to how the immigration system worked in like 2021, 2022, 2023, and they kept just getting held up by the courts. And that's sort of what the ACLU said. They were like, okay, as long as it seems like this is good faith that they're trying to reform the system and not keep hundreds of thousands of people locked up, we're not going to sue them. And then the ACLU started suing them in like 2023, 2024, when they started changing their tune. And now Mayorkas is trying to, like, they're building border wall. They are restricting how many people can come. They're talking about people who have to apply in other countries. They're going back to like the standard centrist route.
But it's also,
and I'm sure some of that's for electoral reasons, but
it's also hard to predict, right? Because the institutional environment does change people a lot, because I think what happens a lot of times is like a guy like Bernie, he might become president and realize, oh shit, like there's a good reason for like 80% of the shit I was complaining about, right? And that seems to happen a lot, like even in individual workplaces, like when somebody says, oh, management's terrible, and then they become a manager and it kind of turns out like, oh, I'm more effective like on the margin. But then it's harder to predict, like, what is the margin that Bernie would actually change a lot of stuff on and be good? Like, it's harder to say, because he's never, like, he was the mayor of Burlington, obviously, but he's never had, like, broad, like, executive experience.
I mean, like, I just don't think he would have gotten legislation passed. I don't see the infrastructure bill getting passed. I don't see the Safer Communities Act getting passed.
That's, like, strategically possible.
I'm
like,
doubtful.
Because like a guy like Joe Manchin might say, I just need to vote against everything Bernie Sanders proposes, because I just can't even appear to be attached to Bernie Sanders. Whereas Joe Biden is a more centrist, like I can work with him a little bit better, more publicly. Like maybe that's true.
I'm not sure if he would have even proposed that stuff. Like, and I think Bernie's very pragmatic for as progressive of a person he is. Like I think he's, one of the good ones in that respect. But I don't see him being as pragmatic and being as capable of getting this stuff done as Biden has. Biden has just a unique ability to get this stuff done. I mean, he did a much better job of getting legislation passed than Barack Obama did. In 2008 to 2010. Now, here's what I should say. Not only would I think Bernie be a less effective chief executive, I think Bernie would destroy us down ballot. Actually, I don't doubt that at all. I'm positive Bernie would destroy us down ballot.
I mean, from what I recall, in the 2016 general, which had way more polling done, because that was sort of when people were thinking about Bernie, he seemed to do much better. Like, I should say not much, but like 2 to 3 points better than Clinton in most of the swing states. Now, obviously, that's just polling, and the polling wasn't great that year, so it could turn out that he would have done even worse. But if you take the polling and you compare it to Clinton's polling, he was doing better.
I mean, I think that down ballot, like in 20, no, because Micah has a point. Like, I think
might do better.
Yeah,
like because none of the negatives. Sorry, wait, none of
why?
Go ahead.
What's the argument?
So none of the negatives, like Fox News was not going after Bernie Sanders. I mean, if anything, a lot of the Republicans were saying, "Oh my God, look at how Hillary's rigging the system against Bernie." Once the attack mode goes on Bernie Sanders and they start running their negative stuff on him, like they did with Hillary Clinton, he would do way, way worse. Like it's like there's no not even a chance in my mind. There are so many Democrats in this country, so many moderate people that vote for Democrats that cannot see themselves within Bernie Sanders' tent. They can see themselves within Biden's tent. And Biden was such a uniting figure for our party because I think he was able to bring in the progressives and he was acceptable to them. He was like the new FDR, and he was able to bring in the moderate wing. I think Bernie would just lose this very big, significant moderate wing of the coalition.
I mean, I think a lot of these things are hard to judge because Sanders is already self-described socialist. He's saying like the socialist word on stage, and you could watch in real time. His polls actually showed like the favorability slightly increased for the word. And I know that's like focusing on just the word, and you're talking about more general attack ads, more general like attack on him. I can't. It's impossible to really evaluate this, right? But in my view, it seems like he's already got a shit ton of dirt on him just from how he identifies, and he seemed to do all right in the general polls. Is my point.
Yeah, I don't think that like Biden or I don't think Bernie. I would have agreed more about the uncertainty in his general election performance in 2016, but I feel like by 2020, like Bernie was a pretty well-known national figure. I mean, you see the polling where like he literally has like an 80% national approval rating. Like people generally seem to like Bernie.
I think he is the most popular Democratic politician. With Biden, like I could go pull up the YouGov, but he is like he's in the top 10 at least, and like the top one is like Barack Obama. all people who don't hold office anymore. He's the most popular, I think, who's holding office. I'm not trying to.
There's a bunch of Fox News watching working class Trump voters that I guarantee you say they approve of Bernie Sanders. But if they were ever given the choice to vote for a Republican or vote for Bernie Sanders, they absolutely would vote for the Republican.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, there was a time when Bernie appeared like people were kind of resigned to Bernie being the nominee in 2020. Like he had basically won Iowa's popular vote, he won New Hampshire, he won Nevada, and there was that time between Nevada and South Carolina when there was a shitload of segments on left of center news like MSNBC, CNN, stuff like this, where it was like, you know, a bunch of these establishment people were like, oh, I guess Bernie's going to be the nominee. That's going to fucking suck, right? And like you started to see like what that proto coverage, what like the proto coverage would look like. And I don't know. I mean, I really don't think
it was Democratic partisanship won out. I thought like people they were vote blue no matter who for like 99% of people that I saw anyway. They were like, yeah, I'll take it over Republican.
I think Bernie would have won in 2020. I think the big question is like how. I mean, Mike is right though. The down ballot's harder to predict. Like, would we have won both of those Georgia Senate seats?
No,
like, that's a hard question.
I think Bernie would have.
For what it's worth, Clinton
lost,
did terrible
honestly.
down ballot, right? Like, part of the reason the Senate was so bad is because like the down ballot on Clinton was terrible. So like, it's really like, would Sanders have done worse? I don't know.
I think 2016. I think 2016 is different. I think 2016 is like I could see Bernie winning it. I can't see him winning 2020. I think he would have just done really much worse than Biden. I think Biden was a much stronger campaign than Hillary Clinton's campaign. Even though I love Clinton, she's a queen.
I don't know, but I think there's a lot of people. I think there's a lot of people though. I think you might be underestimating how many people there are that are kind of like my grandma. Like when I asked her, she's like a conservative. She's been a conservative Texas woman, obviously her whole life, and pretty politically engaged, like relatively speaking, like she's a boomer, I guess. But like when I ask her about Bernie, her response is like, "Oh yeah, he seems great. He seems like a nice guy." You know, like it's just, I think there's just a lot of people that they just kind of vote based on vibes.
So many people.
There's a lot of people that vote based on vibes, and like Bernie's vibes are just kind of like better than Trump's. You know, especially in 2020.
I would just on the YouGov thing I was mentioning earlier, Sanders currently Q3 2023 in YouGov has a 51% approval. Biden has a 44%, just for an idea of it. And you know, Clinton has a 43. So I'm not trying to say like this is objective proof he would have won the election. It's just that like it seems reasonable to me to think that he might have done the same or slightly
like
better.
You're too certain, like,
enormously better.
Micah's too certain.
Micah was talking about epistemic humility earlier. Where is your humility now, Micah?
What it's just absolutely insane to me. It's absolutely insane take. But anyway, why don't we talk about our Senate map and our 2024 chances?
Oh God.
Have you guys seen the Senate map? Can we put the Senate map up?
270 to win. Let me look it up real quick. I mean, I think in the Senate, there's like some pretty bad shit that's
it's a very bad map. So we have Ohio's up, Sherrod Brown. We have John Tester in Montana. He's up. We have a Nevada seat up. We have Arizona. We have Virginia, and we have Pennsylvania. And so the ones that are in red states is Ohio and Montana. Those are the most contested. Arizona, the Green Party has ballot access, which is going to be a problem. But abortion's also going to be on the ballot, and Carrie Lake is an awful candidate. But Kyrsten Sinema might run, which introduces spoiler risk for us.
All right, I need the Senate map. Let's look it up. Senate. There we go. 2024 Senate interactive map. Here we go. We got Texas, Florida, Pennsylvania, all these guys. I don't know, guys. I mean, I feel like in the Senate, there's like a pretty strong headwind for Democrats to at least maintain control. Like, what do we imagine? Like, I guess Ohio and Montana are pretty big what ifs, but like, I don't know. It feels like John Tester and Sherrod Brown are pretty strong in those states. Like, I'm pretty confident in their ability to win again, but I don't know. I could be wrong.
So when was the last time we won in Ohio?
Well, outside of Sherrod Brown. Yeah, Sherrod Brown is what I was going to say.
Probably like 2008.
So Tim Ryan lost 2 years ago, or last year, I suppose. We won in Ohio with Sherrod Brown 6 years ago. The cycle was 2018. That was a really good cycle for us. Now we should probably look at the point differential to see if, because we're going to expect Sherrod Brown probably to do worse by like about at least 2 points than he did last time.
I mean, I don't know. Like,
Let's
I
see,
think
2018.
that's fair, but I mean, I think it kind of goes back to the 2024. Like, one of the things I have here is thinking about the 2024 election in general and the headwinds thereof. Like, Micah, you make a pretty strong case for that. Pretty much all the headwinds are in favor of Biden and the Democrats. Like, it looks bad right now, but, you know, we're 11 months out. A lot of shit's going to change. The economy is probably going to continue to get better and better. Knock on wood, obviously, barring any sort of unexpected recession. And, you know, I mean, a lot of that infrastructure investments coming online, like, it just seems like it's not really going to be that bad of a Democratic year. And that's not to mention that Democrats have outperformed like every single election between 2020 and today. So, I mean,
Sure.
you know, seems like the
So
Democrats
I
are
will
do
say that
okay.
I'll add 3 pieces of data to this. First is that I pulled up the 2018 election. Sherrod won by maybe like 8 points. So he could comfortably win, even losing, say, 4 points or whatever. It would be close, but he could do it. So I don't know.
Well, if he lost, he got 53.4% of the vote,
Mhm.
right?
Well, what
Yeah,
we're not
and
taking
the
into
other-
So
account.
if he lost 4 points,
Yeah, so that's a 6.9 margin. So he could only lose 3.
What we're
Yeah.
not taking into account is
Well,
also
you
the
know,
fact
there's
that
a third-party candidate.
the Republicans might nominate like a literal fascist, like completely insane right winger as well, kind of like what happened in
no, they
Pennsylvania, right? So that could
No,
definitely
they
be a
absolutely
problem.
are. I see erosion for us. I don't see us doing better than 2018. I mean, we lost seats every cycle after 2018. But, like, I think he's going to win. I think he's going to win by 2 points. Probably.
I think it'll be
Maybe.
close.
Yeah, it'll be close, but I my bias is that it just like, and when I say my bias, I just mean based on sort of historical election outcomes. It just seems like these incumbents are just really strong in these Senate races, and like I think Montana's a much more up in the air seat to me than Ohio for a number of reasons, but like I think John Tester can still pull it out if he runs and is, you know, generally just runs like he's been running. Arizona is also pretty interesting because you've got potentially Kristen Sinema running as like kind of a third party double spoiler. Like, who does she take more from, Carrie Lake or like the Democrat? That election could be fucking disastrous because it could end up being like Carrie Lake being the senator from Arizona or something. But
so Montana, last time, John Tester got 50.3% of the vote. Rosendale got 46.8%. I'm assuming the rest went to a libertarian. Now we need to see if the Libertarian Party is fielding a Senate candidate and like they have ballot access there, because they're going to do worse because the Mises Caucus has destroyed their infrastructure. I don't imagine them doing as well as they did last time.
Not based.
Yeah, based.
Fucking, it's really bad, actually.
Destroying the Libertarian Party.
I should say based, but I hate it's first past the post. Oh my god, I hate this.
That's true. We need the Libertarians.
What I do recall from polling on Sinema is that it was like a month after she like abandoned the Democratic Party. She was winning like 5% of Democratic votes. It was like abysmal for her. Like the average Democratic Party partisan is like sees no blue next to her name and their eyes light up and they just immediately like the average Democratic voter is very strongly partisan. Is all.
Well, I was gonna
same as for the Republican.
I was gonna ask as
but the
well.
thing
Like,
is there any Republicans that are going to vote for her?
Yes, in the same poll, it was roughly even when I was looking at it, but that was a year ago, so I don't know.
The polling seems to show that she takes about 5% from each party, essentially. And I was going to ask, like, on that theme of third-party candidates, I was going to ask, like, what do you guys think about? Somebody in the chat's been talking, like, what about Kennedy? What about Kennedy? Fucking talk about Kennedy. And it's like, well, what do you guys think about, like, because there are kind of a lot of potential spoilers. Like, you've got Cornel West, Jill Stein, Kennedy. Like, what do we think what do we think the end effect will be?
I mean, just bluntly,
I don't think Cornel West has ballot access.
Cornel West isn't getting on the ballot, so very few people are going to write him in. Kennedy's only on the ballot in one state, so very few people are going to write him in. And there's some third guy I forget even the name of, but like these are all so minor and they're so inept at running, they aren't even like a major challenge. I will just say on Kennedy, we didn't talk earlier about foreign policy. I think Bernie would have been better than Biden on foreign policy. Like he's still fairly interventionist. He would have supported Ukraine, but he would have been way harder on places like Israel. Whatever. But pulling aside from that, I know that could be a 15-minute conversation. Kennedy, if the big thing you're worried about is warmongering, Kennedy is like the most pro-Israel candidate in the Democratic or formerly Democratic Party. Like he is like extremely strongly pro-Israel. And he's against funding Ukraine, but that's just because he's like pro-Russia. So I don't think this is the guy to go for like a principled anti-war stance.
Yeah, so Kennedy, the thing about Kennedy is like, I'd actually want him to be on the ballot because I feel like he'd be a Trump spoiler. But we need to do our actual. He would be a Trump spoiler if we propped him up as a Trump spoiler. Like we sent anti-Kennedy campaign ads to likely Trump voters that basically said, "This guy's so awful. Democrats hate him. Look, Joe Biden hates this guy. He's against the system."
Who was that trans woman who had a beer? What was the trans woman who had a beer and that made conservatives just go insane? What was her name?
Dylan Mulvaney. Right.
We need Dylan Mulvaney to like just nonstop be like, oh, this Kennedy guy, he's terrible. I hate this Kennedy guy. And instantly 10% of Trump voters, Kennedy stands for life.
Well, that's my thought. I was talking to Micah about this before, where I think that Kennedy, so he's polling like unbelievably well, but I think that 10 months into a general election campaign, I think 10 months into a general election campaign, all the Democrats and left-leaning people that are supporting him now in the polling, they'll realize how crazy he is and pull back and support Biden. But like SDL said, I think that, and like Micah alluded to, I think that what'll be left come November, if he's still running, is like 5% of people that are like mostly pretty crazy, like anti-vax, like Republicans who probably would otherwise vote for Biden end up voting for Kennedy instead. So it'll probably be a bit of a problem.
But I think he does take some Biden voters, and I think it's specifically because of his new, very problematic messaging strategy. So his old messaging strategy was awesome. It was like, I hate vaccines. I hate the woke mob corporations.
Wow,
like
based.
I'm getting.
He
I'm
actually
giving
spent a
you a
lot of time
centrist
hitting on
agenda.
immigration as well. He went to the border and he was talking about how we need to shut it down.
Yeah, he was like, defund Ukraine, fund border security and deportations. And I was like, dude, this is great. Like, I love this guy. This guy's awesome. Now he's like, I want to be a moderate unifier. I want to bring people together and bridge the divide and talk about the issues that unite all of America. And I'm like, fuck. Like, no, like that actually appeals to like our voters.
Micah says,
and it's not going to appeal to most of them.
Please be more racist. Please embrace racism, Mr. Kennedy.
Yes, please. But I'm glad he does that. I hope he gets ballot access in like one. I honestly hope that he gets access in like lean red states and that we can prop him up to do so well that we make them swing states. That'd be the ideal situation for us.
It's funny.
Texas access for Mr. Kennedy. Texas access for Kennedy. We're getting Blexus one way or another.
Goodness, we'll see.
I think say that like U.S. partisanship is so insanely strong. So we have a first past the party system, first past the post system, which only really works for two parties. And yet our system is, in terms of how people vote versus how the elections turn out, our system is so close to a like okay. Literally 98% or something of voters choose one of the two parties. Our system is more representative in that sense. Is more representative in that sense than some countries that have single transferable vote. Like because of how close people vote to that two-party ideal, like we don't actually have a lot of wasted votes in the system. People are incredibly strategic voters.
Well, yeah, we don't have like we don't have PR. We don't have PR, but like the number of wasted votes is
I'm not saying this well, but
right?
my point is that like our wasted votes are similar to those of PR systems, which is incredible because people are insanely partisan and insanely strategic voters in the system, which I think is bad.
Unlike
I don't
Canadians.
want that system, but like at least they know what system they're in and they're actually working with it. So
yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like
we
strategic
think that voting award.
It sounds like we think that. So would it be fair to say if Biden loses, it's probably not because of Cornel West, Jill Stein, or Kennedy's campaigns?
I mean, it's always possible.
No.
But I mean,
I don't know. I feel like in 2016, what was it? 50,000 votes across 3 states. Like Jill Stein gets 1% of the vote. I mean, it's kind of
one problem is that it's not clear what percent of the Green voters you should quote unquote give to the Democrats. Like in a world where the Green Party didn't exist, what percent of them would hedge and vote for the Democrats? And my assumption, just based on talking with like hundreds and hundreds of Green Party voters, is that it's like, I don't know, 10% or something. There's a lot of people who, if they couldn't vote Green,
SDL's spoken to the entire Green Party. Hundreds and hundreds. Wow.
You joke, but there's only like I think like 15,000 people who vote in the Green primary like nationwide. Like I've actually talked about how DSA could take over the Green Party if we wanted to. If we just got half of the people in the DSA to join the Green Party, we could choose their candidate.
DSA Green Alliance.
I'm not saying is useful.
Make it happen.
I don't think that would be particularly useful, but we could do it.
Here's what y'all should do. I mean, like, your organization's crazy. You might be one of the few reasonable people on there, but I think if y'all were reasonable, y'all would take over the Green Party, and then you would just close them. Like, you just close the doors. Sorry, guys, goodbye. Jill that we like is Joe Biden.
I'm convinced that what you should do with the Green Party is like run it in all the solid blue states, but then fail to get ballot access in the swing states. Run it in the red, run it in the blue, but you have like a 5-point margin around the swings, and then it's perfect.
But what's the point? Right. Like what's just running the primary, y'all? Like,
well, I mean, I'm also a leftist, so I want people to be like, "Wow, green politics, this is so cool."
God, their policies are so bad. Their policies
look, the Green Party,
everything.
The Green Party is it's potentially a good avenue for a discussion on another day. But I wanted to cut our discussion here. We got to move on to our next topic here. We're about 30 minutes in.
Wait. We need to actually make predictions so that we can compare these. Because last time I made election predictions, it's on my YouTube channel.
Okay,
I got almost everything correct.
Let's predict the House, the Senate, and the presidency. I'll go first. I'll say Republicans keep a slight margin in the House in 2024. I'll say Democrats keep the Senate. And I'll say Joe Biden wins, but it'll be similarly close in 2020. I think Joe Biden will win a pretty close race.
I guess my bet. I'm pessimistic based on the polling. I know the polling isn't super predictive this way out, but I assume Republican president, Republican Senate, Republican House, all pretty slim
Holy
for
shit.
the Senate and the House.
SDL doomer pills. Jesus.
The polling's not good, and the special elections have not been great. Like the special elections before, I think, what was it, the 7th? Whatever it was in November, they were like +4 Dem, but after then they've been +2 Republican, which is really worrying because that means that Biden loses and we probably lose the Senate. So that's my prediction.
So STL's prediction is fascism. Folks, I'm about to hope kill all of you. Okay, we're getting the House. If we get the presidency, we get the House. I don't even think I haven't seen a prediction where we get the presidency, but we don't get the House.
Well, that happened in 2012 in Obama's re-election, you know.
Obama's a unique candidate. Now, in terms of...
Is he uniquely bad? Is that what we're saying?
Obama was very good for himself, very bad for everybody else, unfortunately. God bless the man. But that's we did awful down ballot in every single election except for 2008 with Obama as the lead. So, but do we win the Senate? It's going to be either 50 or 49. And the only one that's in question is Montana. That's the one I think we can lose. I think we're going to win in Nevada. I think the Republican Party organization there is very weak, and they keep nominating awful candidates. I think Carrie Lake is an awful candidate. And I think since abortion's on the ballot, it's going to help us. I think Sherrod Brown is a really strong candidate. And I think John Tester's a strong one too. But since the Libertarians are going to do worse, and it was so tight last time, I imagine we lose it. Now, this is my argument against what STL is saying. Every single trend is going to be benefiting us. Me and Econoboy talked about this previously. Israel-Palestine is going to be wrapped up or out of the news in 11 months. It just will be. Like, nobody cares about Ukraine anymore. Like, I'm telling you, people, okay, the vast majority, we're talking about voters here. We're not talking about like hyper online people. Are they going to be talking about Israel-Palestine and making their voting decision on that day in November based on Israel-Palestine? I do not think they will be. I simply think it will be out of people's minds. We're going to be thinking about marijuana. We're going to be thinking about the fascist thing Trump said yesterday. We're going to be thinking about the new executive order Biden just signed. The economy is going to continue to get better. The economy is going to continue to get better. That's at least what the trend seems, which means that people are going to adjust to their prices. And we know that economic outlook is sticky, but it's not permanent, right? I think the outlook is going to improve over time. And in addition, Trump is going to be spending so much of his money and time looking like a muzzled dog on TV in court cases because he doesn't want to get punished by the courts. I think it's going to hurt him a lot because, like, we're saying this guy's not going to be able to spend the money that a normal candidate would, and he's not going to be able to campaign like a normal candidate would. That costs you some voters.
So I guess I think that when the polling and the special elections seem to line up with like a -2 environment, I guess that's where I lean. The hope, like I think you are presenting the hopeful case, but it's a hopeful case for the future, and we won't know it till we get there, which is unfortunate. It's not the sort of thing where like, oh, the economy's already good, and we know it because the special elections are good. We know it because the polls are good. We have to assume that these polls are not representative of the general. We have to assume the specials are not representative of the general, which is why I'm dooming, because I assume things will probably tend to be roughly where they are now. I don't know. It seems like confidence has very slowly been ticking up in the economy. So
yeah,
I guess,
I mean, 10 months is a long time. After if it slowly ticks up for 10 months, that's a big difference between now and 10 months from now, right? I don't know. I mean, that's where it is. It sounds like we have very disparate, somewhat disparate predictions. I guess Mike is the most
only
hopeful.
one will win.
Yeah, unified Democratic government says Mike. Unified Republican government says SDL, and I guess I'm in the middle here. I say split government with Biden as the president.
I feel like if I
think that we can lose the Senate.
I was going to say, I feel like Econoboy, if I was going to say anything, it would be Democratic president, Democratic House, but Republican Senate. Like that, like you lose Manchin at least. So
I don't know. I think Republicans.
We have 51 though.
Republicans are gerrymandering more, and like not only are there more states that are Republican gerrymandered, they're also Republican gerrymanders have become even more insane over the years, where like I think the structural deficit in the House is probably widening. Like, yes, New York might be gerrymandered in 2024. Like, I think that's probably a good thing. And maybe if California stopped being, oh, we're just going to do this nonpartisan shit, like maybe California would make a huge difference, but that's not going to happen. So that's why I would say, just generally speaking, like Senate elections don't have gerrymandering, right? So that's why I give a slight edge to the Democrats.
I have good news for you. We actually, there's a map that you can look at that shows you the net impact of the gerrymander. It looks like the blue team did gerrymander a lot, because the net impact is, I believe, there's 4 swing seats that are gone, and there's 4 more lean Democratic seats. That is the net impact. That's all that happened. Okay. Yeah, like places like Texas, we lost Democratic seats, but in places like Wisconsin, or
right,
like
Wisconsin, the net impact. I understand. Yeah, you can be right.
Yeah,
you can be right. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
That's what the map says. And we know how good these election predictions are, generally speaking. But Mr. Trust the Polls SDL.
I've always taken a consistent trust the polls position. In 2016, I said trust the polls, Hillary will win. In 2020, I said trust the polls, Biden will win. And in 2024, I'm saying trust the polls, Trump will win. It's that simple.
Like I think we all hope.
I'm sorry,
you're right,
they were wrong in the midterms. They were wrong in the midterms. They were wrong in 2016. I think they're.
How far off were they?
They were wrong in the midterms.
Points? Like 2 points?
They were. I think they were a good 3 points off. We can run that. That's a discussion for a different time.
Okay, yeah, that is a discussion for another time.
I mean, we're running from the discussion.
Get some spreadsheets out.
All right. Well,
maybe this. Just to finalize my predictions.
I'm right.
I think we're going to win the House. I think we're going to win the presidency. And if we lose the Senate, it will be by 1 seat.
Wow. I mean, that's the 1 seat that matters.
I guess,
right? Well, hey, we'll see. Obviously, we all hope that you're right, Micah, that the Democrats come out, unified government 24, implement socialism, as we're all hoping. And we know that Biden will do that, of course, if he does win re-election. So next topic, let's talk about Javier Milei. This will be our perhaps the wonkiest part of the podcast, Javier Milei. So, America completely lost its shit in 2016, elected Trump. We have some experience with the consequences of elections here. And Argentina may have lost its shit by electing Javier Milei as their president. He's an anarcho-capitalist, but he's also, which I didn't know this until recently, a trained economist who has worked essentially as an economist for his whole career. He has a plan to privatize. Yeah, exactly. He's just like us. He has a plan to privatize state enterprise, but he also wants to broadly tax exports while also eliminating limits on exports. He also said he wouldn't cut welfare. He's giving aid to Ukraine. He's devaluing the peso. So he's sort of this libertarian nationalist type person, you could say. He's also cracking down on strikes.
Why is he taxing exports?
Well, give me a second here, Mike. Give me a second. He's cracking down on strikes. He's causing people to call him a fascist. But then again, he's also criticized Putin and Maduro, suspended relations with Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela because, they're dictators over there. So what do we make of all this? Is this the weirdest possible set of positions that might actually solve Argentina's problems? Is Javier Milei stacking up W's and solving Argentina's crisis? What do you think about this?
SDL start.
SDL is speechless.
Sure. Well, so I know that one of the things that makes people call him a fascist, and this is probably something we'll all dislike, is the broad crackdown on protests. So like something he did is that he said that people who were found to be protesting would lose access to welfare, which is like just a deeply authoritarian thing to do, like just deeply evil and very non-ANCAP. Like I guess that's his way of cutting welfare or something. But
Wait. Was it the people who were protesting or the people who were blocking the streets?
I think it was people who were blocking the streets would lose access to welfare. But the problem is that since most of the protests are like going down the streets, right? Like I don't know, it'd be like you saw you're like, oh, you're marching through Washington. Well, of course you're marching on the streets, and then you lose access to welfare.
Illegal to walk on the street, Micah? Is that what we're saying now?
So I think
Micah is a big fan of cars, as we all know. He thinks that cars are really important. They need access to the street.
I think that they're. I'm not really sure if I necessarily agree with this, but I have to look more into the specific thing you're talking about. But here's what I say that would be probably acceptable: finding people for blocking like primary transit arteries seems appropriate. If you find them in terms of making deductions from their welfare, if they're getting some, that's like an automatic fine. It's kind of weird though because it's a regressive fine. Like it only goes against people who are getting welfare. So that's kind of strange. But I do think I think that. It's not as bad as like, I don't know, just going like arresting people that are in a park, which would I think be the more like if we're talking about real authoritarians, that's what they seem to do. But
well, Javier Milei, he hasn't gone.
I mean, he's only been there for like a week.
Yeah, he hasn't gone full like arresting all of his political opponents yet. But he's what did he STL? You might know, but he created like a national database of like agitating political movements or something like this, which seems pretty scary, right? And I don't know, he seems to be it's almost like militantly anti-socialist, which is a little scary as well.
That's how the FBI started, and I'm not trying to exaggerate here, but like the FBI started as, let's draw up a list of all the agitators. That's what they called them. So they drew up a list of 400,000 Americans. That's like more or less exactly what Milei did. And what did the FBI do with that list in about a year? Well, they arrested like 10,000 people and they deported like another 5,000 people. It's like not pretty foreboding.
Wow, Micah, pro Hoover FBI.
Goodness. Let's go.
Look, I think the domestic sort of political stuff is a little bit more up in the air because it's also more vague. It's also something like I don't think Javier Milei campaigned on like throwing all the socialists in prison, but also we don't really know if that's what he's going to do. He has to give him more time. But in terms of his foreign policy has been interesting, I guess. Like he has called Putin a dictator. He's given aid to Ukraine. I mean, suspending relations with Cuba.
He's just pro-Western. It's very simple. He's
a very pro-Western. He's very pro-Israel too. He's very pro-Israel. Like. For the region, I guess, in general. So yeah, it's just interesting. Like I think suspending relations with Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua is like almost certainly a bad thing, So we'll see how that works out, but who knows?
Yeah, I guess I'll just say it's interesting because it's actually very different than a lot of anarcho-capitalists in this country, because ANCAPs in this country tend to be very anti-interventionist and somewhat skeptical of like quote unquote the West or whatever, whereas he is like staunchly pro-America. So
I mean,
like Ron Paul routinely appear, like his cronies routinely appear on like socialist and like RT podcasts like all the times because they're anti-war. So
yeah, who knows? I mean,
they're anti-America in many cases. They're anti-America in many cases, but I think we should talk about his economic policy and whether we think it's going to work. Yeah, it's certainly a mixed bag. Now, I am confused about the export taxes. Is that has something to do with him trying to let like currency reserves or something? I
mean, export taxes in Argentina have historically been used exactly so in order to get dollars into the economy and like in the central bank, and so he's. And that's why that combination of policies seems odd at first, but when we understand, like he's trying to dollarize the economy, right? So when his view is like we got to get as many dollars as we can, well, eliminating limits on exports, so export as much as you want, but then also a broad-based tax on exports, give me a lot of dollars for all those exports. Obviously, that's where the logic is coming in, and the devaluing the peso is just another way to spur exports as well. And he also said he wouldn't cut welfare because he said, it's not the poor people's fault that the government's such dog shit. So he made that commitment on TV. So, it's hard to say, like, he's basically doing like a contemporary shock therapy that's a little bit different than like Washington consensus shock therapy. But I don't know, SDL, how do you think it'll work out? Obviously, I assume you're probably the most anti Milei. Like I'm like 9 out.
Argentina.
I'm 9 out of 10 anti Milei. SDL's probably 10 out of 10. Micah's like just loves him. He's like a 1 out of 10.
Only 9.5. I love the organ markets. I think we should keep the organ.
That's true.
I think that one of the big things that we've seen so far, and this will seem minor, but it's that he has allowed in contracts between workers and businesses, and in contracts between renters and landlords, he has allowed them to demand payment in any kind of currency, including cryptocurrency, including physical goods, and especially including dollars. And so I'm just like, I think a lot of this follows the dollarization logic, but that's really bad. Like if your landlord could, if your rent comes up for negotiation, Micah, and like your landlord is suddenly like, I need you to pay me in euros. You're like, what the fuck, dude? Like this just adds another 6% to my rent. And in Argentina, that might add like 50% to your rent, depending on the fucked up inflation rate at the time, or the fucked up exchange rate at the time. So.
Well, no, like, wouldn't it have to be the same amount in dollars based on like the current exchange rate? Right? Like,
well, no, but it's just that there might be a disconnect between how you get paid and how you pay your rent, right? So if you get paid in pesos, and then your landlord,
I don't think that's going to actually like raise. Like, I don't think it's actually going to
presumably
necessarily
be
raise
similar.
Rent.
But I'm just saying it would add like all the
transactional costs.
Yeah,
there's a transactional cost. I mean, I think, yeah, cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrency. There's very low transactional cost there. U.S. dollars or like European, like euros. There's a transactional cost there. I kind of understand why he's doing it. I don't actually support the whole dollarization push. I don't think it makes sense. I mean, it's going to require an enormous wealth transfer to the United States, which is cool for us. Bad for them, right? They're already kind of poor because they basically had to produce like an entire year's worth of gross domestic product, deliver it to us just for us to give them enough paper to use in their to use in their economy. And
ignoring chat brings up a good point in the chat. And this was like a theme in a lot of the videos and reading that I did on Argentina, was that Argentina is already like significantly informally dollarized. And so if Javier Milei gets everything he wants and just formally dollarizes, like, do we even expect the impact to be that crazy? Because really, like, it seems like in every single video interview you do with Argentinian people, it's like, oh yeah, we just use dollars for everything anyway. Like, nobody fucking wants to use the peso.
I didn't realize that.
Right?
Well, I mean, if so that means that's part of the reason probably why the pesos is such a dire state, right? Because people are leaving it for the dollar. Demand for the pesos dropping.
I think the devaluation was an official thing, rather than an organic thing. But
no. I'm saying the inflation, right? So like the purchasing power of these pesos is going down. Their exchange rate with the U.S. dollar is like, I think, been historically abysmal. Why? Well, if people are already shifting and the demand for these pesos is going down because they're using U.S. dollars as their means of transaction, that means like demand's going down, supply is the same. It's actually probably going up because the central bank's crazy. So yeah, that would make sense. That's probably part of the reason why the currency's been doing so poorly. And that actually means dollarization makes a lot more sense, even though they don't have tons of reserves, because so many people, so much of their wealth and consumption capacity and transactions are already happening in dollars.
I mean, it's hard to say, right? Because Argentina is not really quite the export power that it used to be. Like, it's hard to say, like, can a developed economy even be dollarized? Because you have to have, like you said, those reserves in order to be a dollarized economy. And like, how do you build those reserves if you're a middle income country that is exporting less and less over time? Like, it just doesn't. It seems like it would necessarily be very unsustainable. And they're a huge country.
It just depends on how much transactions like output is already being accounted in dollars, and like how big that informal economy is, right? So it's like 20% or 10%. Probably not, right? But if it's already like a lot of it, then I guess it's less of a leap. And it makes sense.
Let's transition a little bit. The thing getting a lot of play is all the privatization, right? So it's funny because some socialists have been like, oh, he's going to sell the state enterprise to the workers. Maybe Javier Milei based crypto socialist, right? But really, that's a bit of a red herring. But the point is, like, part of the problem a lot of pundits will say about the Argentinian economy, just generally, like, is like government bureaucracy and like over administration of government services, and these state enterprises are inefficient. Like, what do we think about this? And if that is a problem, like, is privatization just like the right thing to do? Like, what do we think the effects of this will be?
I'd love to hear Micah's opinion.
So I mean, here's the deal. I've read, I believe, virtually every meta-analysis on privatization that thus far exists. And generally speaking, the result is clear. Privatization works, and it works better if you do it the right way, right? Like public auctions, very competitive, and sell the shares to a diffuse number of people, because many times state-owned sectors are concentrated. So we want to at least deconcentrate their ownership. Corporatization, maybe splitting them up into multiple firms. That is like the ideal way of going about it. But pretty much all forms of privatization seem to be better than state-owned enterprises, including in third world countries. That result does hold. I imagine Argentina's administrative capacity in terms of its state, the administrative quality of these state-owned enterprises is extraordinarily low. Privatization has already been shown to work in European countries, improving productivity, like France. I imagine it will certainly work if it's done properly in Argentina. So I think it's probably good, unless some of these are like natural monopolies. I can imagine it can be problematic in a few instances if it's like utility companies.
Yeah, so I haven't looked at exactly which sectors he's talking about privatizing. I know that one of the complications I've seen in the privatization research is that sectors which require
it's literally all of them. He said, like, I want to take every state-owned asset and privatize all of them. So there's your answer.
Like, it's a list of 41. I guess I'll have to look through it. Oh no. I guess my point was just that one of the complications I saw is that sectors which required a lot of state subsidy tended to do worse after privatization than sectors which didn't need a lot of state subsidy. As in, like a state-owned enterprise, which is already fairly competitive in a fairly competitive market environment, that was easier just to marketize than something which like only was surviving due to state subsidy. Like those tended to show very low growth.
Well, in many cases, those are monopolistic sectors too, right? I think like the quintessential example is like British Rail. Like, okay, do you have like a quasi-private monopoly? I mean, it's sort of a monopoly, sort of not. And then just subsidize them a ton. And like, you have to do like a whole complicated price control scheme to make sure they're actually not just pocketing the subsidy, or do you keep it publicly administered? I think there's a lot more nuance in those cases than like the traditional market, state-owned enterprise in a traditional market.
Well, I think Micah, like, how would you? Because one of the issues that's always characterized privatization, I think this is like the case. I mean, in every single historical example of like state privatization, it seems like we end up with like structurally higher inequality, which seems to cause pretty significant domestic unrest, right? Like people seem to like not really like inequality and things like this. And like one thing that characterizes, I guess, like pretty much all forms of shock therapy, let's say as well, is a rise in inequality. And it's not also necessarily clear that leads to like a good circulation of growth and wealth amongst the people in the countries. So like, for instance, I was looking into Slovenia. So like Slovenia is probably the only country on the planet that like has lower rates of inequality than like the Nordic countries. And when I looked into the history of that country, one of the things that characterized their growth and their economic performance was like a really measured and slow privatization over time compared to their other Soviet counterparts. Like this is not what Javier Milei is doing, right? He's kind of like, it seems like he's leaning towards the bad form of privatization that you mentioned, which is like, fuck it, just privatize everything, government bad. Like, that's probably not going to work out too great for the Argentinian people, if I had to guess.
Well, so I think first we should really break this down policy by policy, because shock therapy means a lot of things, right? So you say that shock therapy necessarily leads to more inequality. I'm not really sure about that. Like I'm not necessarily sure about that. I think probably in a lot of these sectors, there's not really many profits to be had. It's not like there's like a surplus being extracted and it's funding the state. So insofar that privatizing them may produce a surplus from increases in productivity, like, okay, that's just new incomes that are being generated. And I don't know, maybe the impact on the Gini coefficient is like a negative one. It's not like you're splitting the pie in a new way. You're just expanding it, and a lot of that expansion is going to richer people. Now, I think in terms of the historical record of shock therapy, I think it's not really the best, right? But it in some cases it worked better than others. the reason why it's not really the best is a lot of these countries that did shock therapy did it in an awful way, right? They sold off the firms in private auctions, usually including 1 or 2 or 3 oligarchs, and they monopolized entire sectors because there were state-run monopolies. That's what we saw in Russia, right? And that's why I think like the current form of Russian capitalism is in many cases worse than even the Soviet-style socialism, because a state monopoly is generally better
communism.
Is better than like an
communism in one country
run
only,
state-backed. Like, would I rather like state bureaucrats running, a state-owned monopoly, or basically a private monopoly supported by the state, but the surplus directly flows into the pockets necessarily of one billionaire? I mean, yeah, but I'm not sure if Javier Milei is going to do that. It's really going to depend on how he does his privatization. I imagine it won't be nearly as bad as the structure of the Soviet Union, many post-Soviet states employed.
I guess, my assumption is that a lot of the laws that are being imposed, like the devaluation of the peso for people who use peso to buy things, the introduction of taxes on exports and imports. I don't know if he's introducing a tax on imports. Is he? Is it only exports?
Yeah, not that I
This is
saw.
exports.
I couldn't find a lot of stuff because generally speaking, like his rhetoric has been very like he's an anarcho-capitalist, right? Like his rhetoric's generally been like open everything up, get rid of all the trade restrictions. He like one of the first things that he did was, for instance, I believe he opened up competition for domestic air travel. Like domestic air travel used to just be the state enterprise, but he's like, fuck it, just let all the companies come in, we'll compete, and go from there, which, that's probably not gonna end up being the worst thing in general. Like I would agree with Micah that
That's
having
good.
having like state industry monopolies typically is not a good thing. Like most countries with good examples of state enterprise don't typically have state monopolies on like oil extraction or mining or whatever it might be. Like a lot of countries have a national airline, but it's not necessarily a monopoly domestically either. So, that's probably a good thing. But it's
Indian fuel subsidies. What I think they need is, I think they definitely need to shrink the public sector workforce. He fired like 5,000 people. We have to keep in mind that like in a lot of these South American countries, specifically, Argentina, because of its history of Peronism, there is just crazy public sector contracts that have been extracted mostly for political reasons, and there's tons and tons of public sector bloat. So I'm glad that he's going after this employment loan, bureaucratic loan, over like just doing austerity for poor people.
Yeah.
That's probably not ideal. He did also cut fuel subsidies, though, and that is the right kind of subsidy, because why would we subsidize something with a negative externality, aka fossil fuels?
Well,
So
SDL,
one of the frustrations is,
I was going to ask you, SDL, like, obviously, democratic socialists, I think we would agree that the best models of state ownership are very transparent, very democratic, very, like, institutionally strong countries. People will tend to, point out the Nordics, hey, they have a lot of public ownership, but they have very strong institutions, very stable institutions. They're very, very democratic. Whereas Argentina is like almost a classic middle-income South American country. They don't have as strong an institutions. They're not as stable of institutions. They obviously have a lot of economic problems as a result of their institutions. Like, is this an example where, like, maybe the privatization is just like strictly the good thing to do? Or is there a way, do you think, to develop the institutions in a way that just makes state enterprise better? Like, how do you, from a socialist perspective,
Can it
like
be nuanced?
yeah, like how do we make sense of Argentina's problem, basically? How do we solve it?
I guess my assumption was that because it seems like the institutions are fairly corrupt and fairly inept, like there is a case for taking them out of government hands. I think the argument from like a left perspective would be do the crypto socialist thing that Milei was like hinting towards or whatever, like do transfers to workers, like maybe put the unions directly in charge and see if they can do it, right? Like if you're going to allow in competition, then don't do so with a way that could transfer a lot of wealth to like the buyers of these new firms. And I just on stuff like the fuel subsidy, my assumption, like the ideal for me, like would be, okay, get rid of the fuel subsidy, which hurts the poor, but then just add it over in for something like, say, make bus rents cheaper. But he didn't. He like raised the rates on stuff like those. Like just if your goal is to keep the hurt off of poor people, then like cut some transfers that mostly benefit rich people, or cut some transfers that only hurt poor people, then transfer them to something else. That'd be, I guess, the gradualist approach that Econoboy is referring to in places like Slovenia, or I don't actually know what it was.
So, like, we would probably need to look into the deficit situation in Argentina. I imagine, like, I imagine there must be a substantial deficit, or he's just trying to fight his own central bank by running surpluses. I guess whether how much austerity makes sense is dependent on that. In terms of like the actual privatization, I think we might all agree. Like, I think that you should privatize them using open competitive auctions. But I guess you could give like a right of first refusal to the workers there. Like, first you should split them up. That's the first thing you should do. But I'm fine with giving a right of first refusal. If the worker's going to buy it out, and pay the full price or borrow capital from
one of the main reasons that I was leaning towards even not a right of first refusal, but just a transfer, is that people in Argentina, like there's an enormous number of people in Argentina that are extremely poor. And so because of the inequality in Argentina, you'd expect a lot of those right of first refusals to fail, not because the workers are like bad administrators, but just because the economy has been so dysfunctional for so long. I think it's something like 40% of Argentines are under the poverty line.
I guess you could do like some, but I think that's just it's just a bad way to do things. Like, I'm not of the opinion that worker cooperatives are necessarily more productive. I think in many cases they're less productive. We had a whole entire debate about this. No, I think maybe they're about the same.
If we assume they're on par, right? Like, let's just assume it's roughly equal, right? Then the
but here's your problem.
Go ahead.
See, this would if this is just the whole thing is a wealth transfer. That's what we're trying to do here. This would be a remarkably inefficient and inequitable way to do a wealth transfer. It's going to help the workers that work at like the most wealthy, valuable, capital-intensive state-owned enterprises. It's not going to help the people who don't work for a public company. Why would we do that? Why wouldn't we do a competitive auction and send people checks in the mail or any other thing that would actually be much more equitable and help the poorest?
If the proposal is to like replace this with like a UBI, like in other words, sell it, maybe put it into like SW, like a social wealth fund or something, and then use that to fund welfare. But I really don't think that's Milei's approach. Like, his approach seems to be
his approach is not yours either.
I know, but
his approach is not. Neither of our ideas on the table. But if we're going to do something different, we might as well do something that makes sense, right?
Well, Milei's approach is kind of. It seems like the approach that he's hinted at. I don't know if this is. I don't think any of this is like formally proposed legislation. Like, he had his economic decree and stuff, but it's unclear. It is unclear if that will actually end up happening because he doesn't have a super strong governing coalition in either chamber of the Argentine legislature. But it seems like he's hinted at almost like a right of first refusal kind of thing where, essentially workers get like first options on shares and then everything else kind of gets, put in an open auction. And so... But who knows? I mean, the government, the legislature might just override that and say, no, fuck you. Like, there's going to be riots in the streets or whatever. Like, we can't do this. And that's kind of been a characteristic of kind of every Argentinian government that's tried to get inflation under control and things like this is like, they try to do the tough shit, like raise interest rates and, de-bureaucratize a lot of stuff. But then Argentinian people just kind of hate it and they end up voting for like a Peronist the next election who reverses everything.
You know what? Actually, I think SDL's idea could be a political compromise that might make this more sustainable. You could say like, we're going to give the workers 15% of the firm. So you're still like, the government's still getting tons of money out of this, which they need. But like, the workers get a treat, right?
It's part of the reason that I think the gradualist approach works as well is because it avoids situations like this where there's widespread protest and there's an enormous political backlash, because sometimes that political backlash, like in places like Russia, can lead to like sweeping in someone like a Putin and then the oligarchs take back over. Like the worst sort of case scenario is you do have a privatization, but it just goes to the wealthy. And so in an already very unequal country, due to political malfeasance, essentially, like you've sold off the public's wealth, now they don't own it, and now some private people do, and like nothing has gotten better from it.
Right, you're kind of in a rock and a hard place, though. Like, sure. what if you're? Because the thing is, I don't know if a gradualist approach is electorally viable.
I don't think it's a rock and a hard place per se, because like one of the things we know about inflation is that expectations are one of the key. What are we wrong about inflation expectations? No, inflation expectations aren't real.
I think you're wrong. I think you're wrong on both takes. Wrong.
Well, in my view, what I will say is that I've read some research that to me was very compelling, that the quote unquote regime, the people who control the government and their general perspective towards like money printer is very, very, very influential on people's expectations of inflation. And those in turn are very, very, very influential on the actual rate of inflation, because people will build in stuff like that into their contracts. They'll build that into their spending habits. But if they know there's a change coming and they feel they can rely on it, they will change their habits accordingly. So I guess part of the reason that to me stuff like this is to me feels frustrating from Milei is that I don't know that doing all these things at once will lead to like a trustworthy idea of like a stable government that has a clear idea of its economic like ideals and is advanced and is not, you know, it's announcing them ahead of time. It's allowing businesses to slow transition. I don't think this is the right approach at all.
Yeah. See, I think that's just wrong. And the reason why I think this is wrong is because there was a center right government before. So there were parents before him, and then there was a center right government before that, if I'm not mistaken. And they tried to do the gradualist approach. They said it's going to be painful, but we're going to do it in a slow way, and things are going to get incrementally better. And then they lost the next election, and everybody was still upset. Whenever there's going to be pain in these countries, like there's been no pain yet. Javier came into power, and he immediately was protested. People are going to fight him. He knows that he has about 4 years to get this right, to get everything make everything dramatically better. Or these South American voters who love to throw, like are bipolar and switch parties all the time, will throw him out. So I don't think he has a choice other than to do shock therapy if he wants to actually tackle these systemic, long-lasting problems that have plagued Argentina for such a long time.
Yeah, that's kind of my point. Like, I don't know if like electorally, the reason I say it's a rock and a hard place is because people want to see change. Like, they want to see results, right? And obviously, people don't necessarily want to see bad results, right? Because you could change a bunch of shit and make their lives a lot worse. But at the same time, like, I feel like if Milei came in and he was like, hey, over the course of the next 20 years, we're going to like slowly debureaucratize and deprivatize, and we're going to like slowly cut these subsidies and allow market forces to come in. Like, that's not a winning message.
I don't think it's even that simple.
Yeah.
Part of it's just announcing these plans beforehand and then like rolling them out in detail. Like even stuff like that. Like what happened here is that he announced that he was going to cancel something like 300 laws all at once alongside the privatization, alongside like a peso changing. 300,000, really?
Well, 360,000 is the list that he wants to terminate, which is actually just he's terminating entire sections of the legal framework.
Part of the reason I bring this up is
deleting half the departments.
Again, like there's a lot of evidence as well that businesses tend to do well, firms tend to do well in predictable environments. People need like consistent incentives over time. And so part of the frustration for me with this is that rapid changes like these can really fuck up economies. There's lots and lots of stories in economic history about how you do a rapid change that isn't announced, and that changes people's incentives very rapidly. And so that changes how they function very rapidly, which just leads people to stop working effectively.
I mean, I think that in general, you know, I think you want consistency over time, but I really think it depends on the regulations in place, right? Like whenever you say 360,000, some of those might be really bad, right? And some of those might make sense. I imagine a lot of licensing requirements are going, a lot of departments are going, a lot of codes are going. I think for a lot of companies, since it's a deregulation, it's not a new regulation, it's not a new tax. Like they can just choose to continue to do the same thing in the near term, and like you're not going to get in a ton of trouble, right? Because they're having regulations removed off their backs. I think yes, he was clear about a lot of this during the campaign and last time he ran.
Consider an example, like one example of regulation being removed would be something like, I don't know, wage protections, right? So like, let's say there's really bad, observation of companies which are not paying their workers enough, right? They're not getting them overtime, stuff like that. And the unions can't really fight back because Milei's also talked about trying to ban strikes and so on, right? So it's very hard to fight back through that channel. It's very hard to fight back through the administrative channel. So that means that, I don't know, workers get systematically underpaid. That means you might see less consumption domestic firms, right? Like that could lead on to a knock-on effect where you still have bad inflation, but now consumption is going down. So you have a really bad outcome. I'm just like, I have no idea what the overall like thicket of Argentine regulations is, but it's not hard to see how changing incentives could lead to a reduction. Go ahead.
I'm unsure about this notion that like the deregulation is going to cause like a significant demand shock that's going to cause a recession. I almost think that like,
I mean, there were stories of people closing up shops yesterday or like a few days ago because of rapidly changing prices.
I mean, I don't necessarily doubt that. I am skeptical. I'm not really aware a lot of research that says that there's a huge impact from labor market regulations on aggregate demand, unless they generate tons of disemployment. You can look at minimum wage studies. They cause disemployment and they cause a wage increase for a lot of folks. AD effects are like muted in the grand scheme of things, right? There's an impact. But in the grand scheme of things, I think everything else he's doing, like the massive austerity he's expecting, is going to have way more of an impact. And if I mean, I think the issue with canceling those labor market regulations may be that workers get screwed, not so much that like they cause a recession.
Well, I'm trying to say, I think
like,
it's
I think
both,
that's probably
right?
the best point.
I'm saying
I think
like
bad
first off, I would like
deregulations
the
are
workers
bad.
not to be screwed, but like beside of that, like an example
Yes.
would be that if say America got rid of minimum wage regulations overnight, it might not be a bad issue right now because we've got a hot labor market. But let's say we were in really dire straits, like I don't know, 2019, and Trump was like, all right, COVID's here, time to get rid of the minimum wage or something, as unemployment hits like 10% or something, and he doesn't put stimulus into the economy, he's not sending more money into the economy.
Wages are sticky. Wages are sticky.
Why are they sticky? Right? Because there's forces behind them keeping them there. It's not just that like the firms like to keep them there just because they really value consistency. It's also because they can't pay.
I mean, well, wages are sticky for people that are making incomes way higher than $7.25, or like in many states that have like a $12 minimum wage. Like wages are sticky for everybody, even
Sure,
including in recession.
Then suddenly wages weren't sticky. Suddenly wages weren't sticky like midway through 2021 because the forces of really low unemployment led to a rapid rise in wages. So my point is just like, imagine the opposite, right? Imagine if there was a force, say massive unemployment and a removal of minimum wage laws, which did the reverse, then suddenly they wouldn't be sticky. Like it's
there's wage contracts. So in recessions, the reason why employment is because we can't just do wage cuts because wages are downwardly sticky, specifically downwardly sticky, not so much upwardly sticky, right? Like that's the reason why there's unemployment. Otherwise, there would just be wage cuts across the board, right?
Yeah, but okay, from the perspective of aggregate demand, someone taking a X% wage decrease and like that same percent of people getting unemployed is like it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Not from the human perspective, but from the perspective of like how many things get consumed in an economy. So my point is just like I as an example of how these things could lead to a knock-on effect where you've already got bad inflation and now you've got like a decrease in demand. That's all I'm trying to say. It's pretty clear to me. Well, there's some regulations that can really fuck the economy.
I mean, even Javier Milei has said, like he said, like over and over and over again. He said this during his campaign. He said this throughout his entire presidency thus far. Is like, hey guys, things are gonna, get bad. It's gonna be bad. The things that we're doing in the short run.
Never gonna happen.
But in the long run, it's gonna be better. So you just have to kind of just like, hey, let's just calm down, right? Like he's tried to. He's been like relatively honest in that messaging. Like even he is predicting probably like a pretty bad short-term economic outlook because of these changes. But I think that's really the question is like, do we expect in the long run, like yes, short-term pain, but like, do we expect long-term gain? Like that's the big question for me, right?
I think that reducing inflation. I think I probably prefer a peg. That might be much more realistic. Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Hello? Yeah, you were a little dicey there for a second.
Oh, okay. What I was saying is, I think if inflation comes down dramatically, you have these privatizations of firms. You reduce a lot of administrative load, and hopefully you get rid of like the actual bad regulations. You liberalize your trade substantially. I think like all of those things are going to have a positive impact. And I think that like high inflation over a long period of time does have a serious impact on things like foreign investment. So I imagine it'd be good if it works, right? Like the worst case scenario is you have like a perpetual recession and like you just don't get out of the recession. You don't have a quick bounce back. The only thing worse than an inflation is like an economic depression, right?
Yeah, I mean that's sort of why I was like I think there's some things that are likely to lead to surpluses. Like monopolies from inept firms are probably not a good thing. So like with the airlines, it probably leads to a slight increase of overall incomes. But at the same time, like my bet is just that if you really fuck over workers, or you make it so that they can't so that they're spending a lot of their consumption on stuff like changing rents or like a lot of other laws that might be coming in, then you might see a decrease in demand, and that will just worsen. Like if prices go up, that reduces demand, and if demand, like the amount that workers are consuming goes down, then that reduces.
If prices go up, that reduces.
If prices go up, then the amount consumed goes down. Sorry, but
what's prices up? Like demand shifts, supply shifts. Like what's pushing it?
Sorry, I think you cut out.
Because like
I couldn't hear it.
Like what is causing the price change, right? So like if prices are going up, aren't they going up because 80 is shifting right, which means demand's going up?
Well, presumably prices could be shifting just due to ongoing inflation. Like the what you were talking about is the bad outcome is that he doesn't solve whatever is causing like the long-term inflation problem. And so nominal prices keep going up. But if wages don't keep course, then you have like a disjunct between those, right? So the real rise in prices.
Wait, so we believe that the prices are set by supply and demand primarily, right? Unless in extraordinary circumstances.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying
right? Like unless you have market setting power.
Most of the time it's set by supply and demand, yes. But I'm saying that these are extraordinary circumstances where suddenly workers might not be able to pursue their normal consumption habits, right? Like it's not just like
Can you talk about something in which can you talk about an example of something where like the price is going up? It's just like one example of like your thinking applies to this. Like grapes, would grapes count? The price of grapes going up?
Sure. Let's go with grapes.
Okay. So the price of grapes is going up. Why is it going
up? Usually like post-Keynesian theory is either the markup's going up or the unit cost is going up. So either
it's not that the demand is going up.
Well, it could be like one of the reasons that the markup could go up is if the market gets less competitive. That could be a long-term result of less people demanding grapes. There's like overproduction, and that's sort of what I'm talking about. If production stays the same but consumption goes down, then there might be more like slack in. So if demand goes down,
if the supply is the same,
yeah,
demand goes down because wages go down. I think the price will go down.
The price will eventually go down. But a lot of these, I will also add, there's an elasticity to a lot of these. People have to consume rent. They have to consume food. So what we'd assume is that certain bundles, like grapes, actually, possibly, would continue to be consumed at a fairly similar amount over time. But then that would lead to like a recession in other areas where the consumption is elastic. So for example, those airlines...
Can we talk about grapes?
Can we talk about grapes? Sure, we can talk about grapes.
Yeah. Well, I want to make sure I'm not really understanding what you're saying. And I don't imagine much of the audience will be. Maybe I'm just kind of slow. I'm trying to understand why the grapes are going up in cost. And you say, well, maybe the input cost is going up. Okay, so like the input cost, maybe like some of the farm supplies for creating the grapes, maybe that's going up. And so that leads to a reduction in the supply of grapes. I'm not necessarily sure that's happening. So I think it's probably the demand that's shifting. The demand shifting because you have a lax monetary policy that in GDP is growing at a rapid rate, largely because the money supply increases, maybe because of velocity changes, which means demand is going up. And so I don't understand how you could say, well, prices are going up, but wages aren't going up to keep up. That means the demand's going to be too low. And now we're going to have a recession. The inflation is the product of a demand that's growing at too rapid of a pace. In GDP growth is off trend for what it should be, right?
So the problem is that demand is one component, but market power, like I'm trying to say, first there's unit costs.
But this is grapes. We're talking about grapes because the market power thing, like we already admitted, that is in the majority of these instances, we have normal market pricing. We're not seeing market power being reflected,
sure,
right?
So, for example, in the United States, just as a country which is not Argentina, in the United States, there is some evidence coming out that markups did go up significantly over the course of like the COVID. Like a decent chunk of the inflation was in fact due to a rise in markups, not just due to a rise in supply costs. And so I bring this up because it's easy to imagine in like rapid market transitions like that of Argentina, where suddenly people have like rapidly different incomes, suddenly regulations are very different, that you won't have like a market working perfectly and markups are all brought to the competitive equilibrium. Like, the what's the word? Teutonment. The market gropes towards the equilibrium price. It's not something it arrives at immediately. I'm saying that I think it's easy to imagine a case where consumption drops dramatically, prices stay high, and firms keep the markup high insofar as they can, just because there's not like the market isn't competitive immediately.
And I think what SCL is describing is like part of the. I think it's part of the reason why inequality tends to go up after shock therapy, right? Because you do have this transitionary period where the market is liberalizing, competition hasn't quite set in yet, but obviously the market power still exists on the side of the suppliers, right, in a deregulated fashion, and so. That's one of the dangers of shock therapy, right? Is that unless you have like internal structural ways to decompartmentalize markets and demonopolize markets, which I mean to be fair, like that's part of the thing that Javier Milei
like we're talking about grapes,
advocate for. Michael, why the fuck do you keep talking about grapes? Jesus,
because the greedflation folks. like love to like just kind of imagine, oh, there's all these
It's not
monopolistic
all
concentrated
inflation, but
firms,
like some portion is. That's all I'm trying to say.
and like they're causing this huge markup, and like that's gonna change like our entire perception
Well,
of this
no,
thing.
Micah, but you're not. We have
I'm
to
just like,
ground it. We have to ground it in Argentina, right? So we're talking about. We're not talking about the
like,
fucking
I'm trying to
grape
talk
market in an economics textbook, right?
like we need to talk about this specific. So like, but like if you're going to make an economic forecast about like this idea about, okay, there's tons of market power in all these sectors, so much so that we might see a situation where, you know, the pricing, the prices they're going to be setting is not going to be close to the equilibrium price, and that's going to somehow cause a recession or cause a depression. It's going to be like remarkably different than what we'd expect. Like, I think we need to actually like look at these sectors and say, okay, these are the ones that are really concentrated where this is relevant, because like I'm assuming in the majority of instances it's not, right? I
well,
think,
like you said, it just
like
to
housing
me,
is not a case where
it'll
it's a market.
In the
it'll
United
just
States, I think, well, this is an example in the United States. Like food is a fairly competitive market. Like grocery stores don't run high margins, right? Their markups are usually fairly low. I think the profit margin in the average grocery store is like, I think 3 to 5%, something like that. So pretty low. And that means their markups probably like, I don't know, 5 to 10%. So my point is just that despite that, over the course of say 2020 to 2021, 2022 or so, those markups rose significantly despite there being substantial competition, because during the high inflation, which Americans weren't used to, they were able to raise the prices without people really, really fighting it and going to another store. Like I'm just there are instances.
Yeah. Okay. So it's like yeah.
Well, because I think
imagine,
but that's already present.
Like someone privatizes like a third of the economy and then like rapidly changes like the rate at which a currency exchanges. They change like how exports function. They change like a million rules in the economy. It's not hard to see to me how people might not be like the most like price clearing rational consumer in that environment.
Well, I don't think they are right now. There's already hyperinflation. Like I think this is, to the extent that inflation starts coming down, I think that the actual price setting power of individual producers goes down.
What do we think the cause for current? I mean, it's not. I don't think it's hyperinflation in Argentina, but the very high inflation in Argentina.
I mean, it seems like
50% per month or whatever.
It seems like historically the cause of Argentina's inflation, and it's the same thing today, is just like high government deficits, printing money, and bringing on debt essentially, right? Part of it is also the I've heard
the average inflation rate was 206.2% per year, 1980 to 2022. What is it today? Oh, it's 160.9% this year. So I would definitely consider that hyperinflation.
It's very high.
I think the technical I'm not trying to quibble. I'm pretty sure the technical definition is something like 50% per month. This isn't quite there, but it's
not as bad as Zimbabwe, obviously. Yeah, but it's pretty bad. I mean, it's just really, really bad. Again, the analysis that I've seen seems to pit like weak exports, printing money, high deficits as like the main causes for inflation in Argentina. And it's hard to argue with that in my experience. But what do you guys think? I mean, do you guys have significantly different narratives for why inflation is so high in Argentina?
Do they have a monetary finance? Like, are they employing monetary finance?
What do you mean? Like they have a central bank? I mean, what do you mean?
Well, no. So monetary finance.
Go ahead.
Are they monetizing like their debt? Like, is the central bank just doing straight up transfers to the government without like?
Yeah. I've read.
Okay. Yes.
I've read that there is
seigniorage.
Let's
explain this in normal terms, okay? Because I feel like a lot of this is not. So usually the federal government sells bonds and the central bank buys them. That's what happens in the United States. Whenever you have monetary finance, the central bank just gives cash to the government and they don't ask for any debt back. And so it's basically printing money to finance spending. That doesn't happen in the United States. That does happen in some South American countries, does happen in Zimbabwe, and it did happen for a time in the UK.
Well, in Argentina,
so we're saying yes.
From what I've read, that does happen in Argentina. It doesn't happen to the extent that it's happened like in places like Zimbabwe or Venezuela or like Weimar Germany or something like that, because the government at least has like some idea that like, hey, we can't just like infinitely print money. There's going to be like some low percentage of government spending that can be based on printing money, but that does exist in Argentina as well. Again, like this seems like the three main causes is weak exports, it's going to be printing money, and then relatively high fiscal deficits causing these inflation problems.
Yeah, I think that's about correct.
Yeah, I mean, so in that regard, I mean, I just like obviously we can come up with like more progressive ways to do this, and like insofar as those ways do exist, like I mean, it's hard for me to say. Like, it's difficult because that's really my question is like long term, what are the outcomes here, right? That's all that really matters to me because
I mean,
I could see a world where he privatizes all this shit, opens up the markets, inequality goes up by like 50%, but in, 20 years, Argentinians are like significantly wealthier than they are today um, because of all of those structural changes that happened. But, I'm just not sure. It's very difficult to predict because
Yeah.
some shock therapy countries turn out completely awful. Like it actually just seems like it was just bad to do all those things, right? So, it's very difficult to predict from my perspective.
yeah, like I guess if we think the causes are, in short, like high deficits, right, that are or like maybe high debt, then you have to raise income somehow. So maybe we don't mind his export tax. I don't know what Micah thinks about that. I don't know. Like, what is the ideal way to raise money in a country like Argentina? To me, I'm like I look at that high inequality. And I'm like, okay, tax the rich. It's Bernie Sanders time. Like, yes, it'll hurt, and yes, that'll also have consumption problems like I was just talking about, but like at least it'll have consumption problems for the people who will like see the least reduction in their standard of well-being. Versus exports are going to be way more.
Argentina already does progressive tax schemes all the time. I mean, they're the country that does one-time wealth taxes, which I mean, there is an elasticity because they routinely do one-time wealth taxes, which is a little bit bizarre. But I think that like you're not in an environment where it's like, oh, we can just raise taxes on the rich. Like we can just raise taxes on the rich. There's like no elasticity. Yeah, it's fine. We'll just tax the rich. It's gonna be fine. I think there is a significant elasticity in a country like Argentina.
Elasticity,
and I think that there is to the taxation by rich people,
sure.
right? So there's an idea like, oh, we can just tax them. We're just not going to do anything. I think it will actually do something. I think that there's a deadweight loss that's caused by like people working less. That certainly happens. There's deadweight loss caused by capital taxes in terms of less investment. That does certainly happen.
So
but there's also rich people leaving.
Just wealth.
So let's look at the tax system.
I don't actually. I mean, aside from like income taxes, I know income taxes have some deadweight loss, but so my understanding is that you still have fairly high productivity and very high like workforce participation by people who are very rich in like very redistributive tax system models. I know that the Nordic countries have fairly flat taxes on the whole. They tax a lot of people a lot of money, but
yeah. So there's been a lot of studies that have been conducted on the actual impacts and like elasticities of like income to taxation, elasticities of capital gains to taxation, corporate and taxes. I think traditionally speaking, corporate taxes are one of the worst in terms of the measured impact we see. People disagree a lot about capital gains taxes. I don't think they have on like the lower end. We see a huge amount of impact.
I will say I'm pretty sure most of those studies are just correlational. Like they're not even like synthetic control type causation. They're just looking at like, hey, does a country have higher corporate taxes? Does it have higher or lower growth or whatever?
No, that's. I mean, in terms of the studies that like I've actually looked at, that's certainly not. But it's like there are think tanks that study taxes that use more sophisticated methods than simply look, all our favorite countries have low corporate tax rates. Like that'd be a pretty stupid way of doing things, right?
This is interesting. I'm reading an Economist article right now. Man, Milei's a fucking weird guy. So it says, alongside this, and he's talking about just decreasing spending generally and the devaluation of the peso, the administration will increase taxes on imported goods from 7.5% to 17.5%.
So he is doing an import tax?
Apparently.
What?
It says, however, okay, again, ideological...
I just looked for it. I didn't find it.
It says,
oh my God.
I'm looking at the Economist article. Javier Milei implements shock therapy in Argentina. And then it says child benefits will double. So, I mean, based, I guess,
sure.
As will the value of a government food card.
Are they valuing in the peso, though? The thing that he just devalued by 50%?
I'm not really sure, honestly. It says that the child benefits will double, as will the value of a government food card for the country's poorest. The idea is to cut spending while temporarily increasing taxes to raise revenue in order to lower the annual deficit. So, I mean, it seems like he's targeting that. It's a matter of, it's just a matter of like what is the long term change, because like the devaluation of the peso is on an international market. Like it's not like he what do you call it like a devaluation of a currency doesn't necessarily mean that like poor people have half as much purchasing power. And so I'd imagine that like a doubling of a child benefit or a food, like essentially like a food stamp that we give to people probably has some like real term benefits for people. But again, like he's all over the fucking place. Like he's not really like he's acting like a responsible libertarian. We thought he was gonna he had his chainsaw out. We thought he was gonna come in, cut all these government programs, get rid of everything. But you know, it seems like he's being significantly more measured.
Well, it seems. I mean, he seems like he's doing lots of the right things. I mean, like the privatizations. I think if he administers them correctly, most of them are going to be for the best. Deregulations, I think those labor market deregulations, some of them will be appropriate, some of them will be bad. A lot of the other deregulations, I mean, I imagine there's going to be some good stuff in there. The trade stuff seems to make sense. I'm not so sure about the taxes, but distributionally, I feel like he's doing what you want, SDL. I mean, he's trying to do austerity in a way that hurts the poor the least.
SDL,
and
can we
like
say?
What I would do.
Can we say he also proposed cap and trade? He joined the Paris Climate Agreements. Can we just say Javier Milei stacking up W's, SCL? Is he stacking them up? Okay, or
join the Paris Climate Accord? Really?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like he's a weird guy. Like he's all over the place. It's it's like one day he's like
libertarian.
He's like one day we do something that makes the left happy, then the next day we do something that makes them angry. It's like you never know what you're getting from this guy.
I mean, I guess my view is that it seems like I'm betting that in real terms he was just equalizing the food card and the payments just because of the devaluation of the peso. I'm assuming that the doubling of that value is the same thing as the halving of the peso value. But I don't know. I mean, maybe there's short-term benefits to that before like prices catch up to that.
Well, it sounds like we're settled on time will tell. I mean, who's to say? It seems like some of the stuff could be good. We all agree with that. But fuck, he's only been president for like less than a month. Right?
I think public employment cuts are probably the primary, and subsidy cuts are probably the primary mechanism by which I think he should do austerity, and also just not spending a lot of the money that he's receiving by these sell-offs. SDL, it seems like your point is that he should actually just raise taxes, right?
Well, I mean, one of it's like stop the money printer. The other thing you want to stop is the deficit, so you don't have to use the money printer to pay that off.
How are you going to raise revenue? Like, that's the question. So like what I said is do the sell-offs and cut public employment.
Well, the problem with the sell-offs is that they're only temporary, right? So like to me, the thing is like, oh, you need this government money. Well, at least do the sell-offs into some structure like and then invest them into an SWF or something. You need the ongoing money. Otherwise, you're just going to have those deficits. Like the options are essentially now austerity now or austerity later. And to me, what I'm wondering is if he's doing the privatizations now so that he can afford to keep the social spending, and that's going to get cut later. You only sell the company once.
That's sort of what happened. I think it was like in the 80s or something like that with one of the Argentinian governments where they had like a big privatization, like Washington Consensus type movement where Perón had basically, I think, been put in like prison or something. Like he had gotten thrown out of office by a military coup, ironically, let's say. And they came in, privatized a bunch of stuff. They established a one-to-one exchange with the dollar. So they had like a peso that was worth $1 American. And the way that they backed that was by selling a bunch of state assets. So they had a lot of like one-time cash to back that exchange rate. But then it ended up completely fucking crashing and becoming a disaster because, like SDL's pointing out, that was only like temporary money. And so as soon as it all circulated, they had a currency crisis. It fell apart. And then the economy was basically fucked after that because the peg fell apart. So there's a chance that could be happening today as well. But I mean, to be fair, like Javier Milei, like he is like an actually trained economist. Like he's obviously an ANCAP, which means that he's like completely wrong on a lot of shit. But I imagine he at least understands like the basic mechanics. Like we can't just rely on state asset money to back a dollarization movement. But he is an ANCAP, so he must be kind of stupid. So I mean, like it's hard to say. He's just a really weird guy.
Here's what we should agree on. The last thing you should be cutting is the benefits that the poor people rely on. So long as those benefits are not like having like crazy welfare cliffs or like super bad employment effects, right? I think we can all agree on that. And like tax cuts are probably not in the cards. I mean, tax increases are probably not in the cards, but like that is not the thing you should go after. And I think he's going for the right thing. Now, here's the thing. I will not tweet out I'm Team Javier Milei because I don't want to look as dumb as the Dem stocks look with Venezuela. Okay, I'm going to claim the W once it works. And I'm going to say, look at this, guys. Look, this works.
Wow.
For now.
A drive-by shooting on the dim
optimistic.
socks mid-argument.
Yeah, they were like, yeah, this is base. This is the perfect example of how like
Micah in 1980 would be like, no, I'm not going to claim any successes of Pinochet. I got to wait for it to work.
Yeah. Well, hey, there we go.
I would have been right to do so.
STL, any final thoughts?
I mean, that's the point. You would have been right to do so. The Chicago boys sucked. But I guess, I mean, the take that I was trying to give is I think we've all offered maybe some more progressive ways to do this. It sounds like Javier Milei is maybe doing some of them, though it's not clear to me. Someone in chat was mentioning that the official rate was a fantasy because there were limits of how many dollars you could purchase. So it was like, it wasn't really applying. So I actually don't know to what degree the devaluation of the peso means anything, if he's just bringing it in line with like the real rate. But I guess, I mean, my thoughts are that I would want if you have to privatize, because you need to like make the money to fill the deficit or whatever, then you should want to do so in a way that is as sustainable as possible. So that probably looks something like social wealth funds. And if you can afford like to not get all of that money, then you want to try and give that off in a way that doesn't just massively concentrate wealth into a few people's hands, which led to the like extremely bad both political and economic situations of Russia and like Belarus.
Based sovereign wealth funds, a topic for another day, which we will destroy Micah on. Okay, his anti-sovereign wealth fund nonsense.
Fun fact, Econoboy, Russia does actually have a sovereign wealth fund. I believe it's pretty small, but I think it was during the Russian invasion of Ukraine, I saw some of the dumbest people alive citing to it as proof that Russia was a socialist country.
It's true. It's true. Look, I mean, every country fucking on the planet basically has a sovereign wealth fund, except for America. So we should probably get one started.
Well, whenever your poster boys are Saudi Arabia and Russia.
Hey, come on, Norway. They're the biggest sovereign wealth fund. They're the poster boy. All right, but all right. Well, hey, let's.
Actually, interestingly, just one last note on that one. So, Mike and I have talked about wealth taxes, and he's obviously a big opponent. Sovereign wealth funds are the effective wealth tax because they take up an increasing proportion of the country's wealth by accumulating in value as wealth accumulates in value. So I'm just saying, you want your effective wealth tax. We should simply do a one-time wealth tax. Well, just one last time. It'll work this time, guys. And then just put that in the sovereign wealth fund.
Room. I like
it. I do. I've actually said that it's probably the best way you could do something like that. So that's infinitely better than a repeating wealth tax. Anyway, on to the next topic.
Let's do it. All right. Well, on to voting systems. We'll explain it to SDL for the third or fourth time. Hopefully he'll get what we're talking about at this point. He's like the intro of this time. He's like, I don't understand voting systems. I'm like, voting systems is like this, and he's like, but what do you mean by it? I just don't. I'm like,
Econoboy posted something which was like, be ready to talk about voting systems, and I was like, that could mean a bajillion things, but of course, Econoboy means we're going to be talking about like STV versus Star or some other random crap.
Well, let's introduce the topic then. Let's do it. So, we can't rightly call ourselves wonks without talking about something incredibly boring for most people. So, of course, naturally, that's when we figured voting systems would be a good one. Micah and I are pretty like voting system nerd pilled, and so in general, like, what would you guys think is the best voting system? And like, more or less, like, we should also start out with what should the goals of a voting system even be, right? So I've listed 5 basic forms of voting systems. There's first past the post. There's ranked choice voting, approval voting, score voting, and then there's star voting as sort of the 5, basic forms that most people talk about. But in general, like, how would we answer that question? Like, what should the goal of a voting system be? What is like the purpose of taking a vote in the first place?
So like for a single winner election, I think you want to choose a consensus candidate, a candidate that the majority of people will be at least satisfied with, but also one that has like high degrees that, like, I think you want to take into account enthusiasm. That's a virtue, right? So like if there's 2 different candidates that have high degrees of like common support, maybe one has like slightly bit more, but the other one has like way, way, way more enthusiasm. Like the people really support them. I think that a good system would take into account the breadth of support, but also the enthusiasm of that support.
Okay. What about you, SDL? You're a democratic socialist. I'm sure you've thought about your mic cut out, SDL?
Okay. No, I cut out. I couldn't hear anything Micah said, but he was probably saying star voting, wasn't he?
He was saying some lib shit like usual, but you're you're a socialist,
was it the
obviously.
Cordic voting system or something? Was he doing like the radical market stuff?
So I didn't actually say a specific voting system. Yeah, I think star is probably the best single winner system. We should probably explain what these things are.
Yeah, and we'll get to that. But I'm saying,
I think it's probably
generally though, SDL to the question of what should the goal of a voting system be. That's the first question. Like, what's the point of voting? Obviously, we believe in democracy. I mean, Micah doesn't believe in democracy because he believes in sortition, which isn't democracy, to be fair. But with us Democrats, SDL, what do you think should the goal of a voting system be?
I mean, that's obviously a huge question. Ideally, you want to. I think there's a lot of goals. One is that you want to rotate candidates. You want to try and pursue like uncorrupt candidates. You want to try and pursue highly qualified candidates. I don't think the goal of voting is necessarily just like representing the people's will. The reason democracy is useful is because it produces those secondary outcomes of like generally producing less corrupt, like rotating candidates that are fairly qualified and so on. Now, that doesn't mean very much for selection of voting system because you end up usually just wanting to use something like ranked choice voting. Because like insofar as democracy is useful, you can call it star, you can call it RCV. For one seat, it usually doesn't matter very much. In countries like the US or like Australia or whatever, all of these work out more or less the same. I would just say I'm a huge proponent of not having ever a single seat election. Like that, in my view, the main goal of voting is try and represent okay, how do I put this? What I was talking before is like qualifications. Then I think there's voting as politics. And for that one, you want to be voting to be as purely political as possible. You want the qualifications and all that set aside, but you want the vote, the actual seats to represent the vote, the politics of the vote as closely as possible. That means in basically every case, you want a multi-seat proportional representation. So you can either do that with single transferable vote or just straight proportional representation, where you have X% of the vote, you get X% of the seats.
Well, that's more that's more like democratic system at large. I think the voting system in general,
I think
for
they're
me,
not separate, really.
Well, I would say
let's do two different phases. Let's organize this.
Okay.
Let's
hold on, Micah. Hold on.
Voting.
Give me a second here. I got to answer the question too, Micah. You're jumping in. Okay, you got to give me a second here, Micah. You're killing me. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I would say like I would agree with SDL and Micah. I would add in that I would say a voting system in general, it should be a system in which even the loser feels at least somewhat satisfied with the process and the outcome of the result. And so I would agree that generally voting systems should represent like the okayest outcome amongst people, like people who feel the strongest about certain things should win the vote. But also people who lose the vote should also be able to look at the voting system and say, that was reasonable, it was fair, I understand why we lost, and go from there. That's an ideal. Obviously, everyone's going to be upset when they lose a vote. But that's where we transition into, we've got to agree first past the post is like the worst possible voting system, right? Like first past the post, for people who don't know.
There are worse systems.
No, I mean, there's monarchy would be worse,
what is
to be
worse?
fair.
You could have, you could have a randomly weighted voting system where everyone gets 0 and one random person gets 1, which is sort of like reverse sortition. Just saying, you can do worse than first past the post.
But that's not a vote. Like, I think voting.
It is a voting system. It's just a weighted voting system.
There's
true. STL destroyed Micah.
Plurality voting is probably the worst voting system in which all people's vote count as one. Like there's one vote and you cast it and you select a candidate on the ballot. I don't think you could do much worse than that. And it's the worst of all systems that have like existed anywhere, as far as I know.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it's
genuinely
bad.
Supported.
It's bad because it's disproportionate as well to some degree, right? Because you could have a scenario where you've got 5 candidates running, 23% end up voting, or let's say 28% end up voting for the number one candidate, and then 72% vote for one of the other 4. But then the guy with 28% of the vote ends up winning, ends up representing all 100% of people. That's a very unsatisfying voting system, right?
Exactly. And what Fair Vote always mentions, Fair Vote, very big voting advocacy organization for ranked choice voting, they always say like there's Darth Vader, he's running, Luke Skywalker, Han Solo. Now, 40% of people support Darth Vader, 60% support the good guys, but they are split between Luke Skywalker and Han Solo. So Darth Vader ends up winning with 40% of the vote. Oh no, like it's really bad. That happens sometimes. spoilers take away votes from the better candidate, and sometimes they lead to the candidate that's the least popular winning. And also, it changes candidate. An additional issue is not just the voting system, plurality voting. It is partisan primaries, whereby the candidates that we get to choose between are filtered by these hyper partisan minor elections, whereby, like in the Republican Party, somebody with extremely fringe, radical, crazy views wins their primary very solidly, and they advance into the general election, and we are forced to choose between them and somebody else who went through that primary process for a different party. So primaries are very polarizing, and also plurality voting. Sometimes there's a majority voting requirement where you have to get 50% of the vote in order to win, which means you also have all these runoffs. So runoffs, partisan primaries, undemocratic outcomes, plurality voting, first past the post, its other name, is just as bad as it gets.
Well, let's talk about some of the alternatives then. Like, first past the post is pretty dog shit. We all agree with that. So to explain some of the alternatives that I mentioned before, so ranked choice, it sounds simple enough. It's where you rank candidates from 1 to the nth candidate. So if you've got 10 candidates, you rank them from 1 to 10. If you're lazy and you don't want to rank 1 to 10, you can just put 1 to 3 and then leave your ballot blank. And then the results are tabulated based on, if you got one guy with 45%, another guy with 40%, then everyone else is split between, the 10 other candidates are split between that bottom, what would that be, 15% of the vote. And you just eliminate the lowest candidate and redistribute their votes until their second preferences come in. And you just do that until you get a majority of the vote. This is a system that, generally requires more like horizontal popularity, and it avoids the spoiler effect. Approval voting, basically you just say, do you approve of this candidate? And the candidate with the highest approval rating ends up winning. It's very simple.
So you can, it's like first past the post, but you vote for as many people as you want.
Well, it's exactly right, but it's approval. The approval system in general probably leads again to like more moderation amongst candidates, less extremity, right? And generally speaking, if you've got a candidate with like 65% approval and they have the highest approval, well, they're kind of saying they're broadly the most popular candidate. However, what Micah mentioned before, that's where we go to score voting. Score voting allows you to take into account the degree of passion, right? So score voting is kind of like approval voting, where you can put on a candidate like, I rate this person 0 out of 5, right? So I don't even fill any of their shit out. I don't approve of this candidate. But then you might have some candidates that are very passionate supporters. All their supporters rank them 5 out of 5. And the winner is basically who has the highest average. It's like IMDb voting, who has the highest average support amongst the general population of voting. And that's who ends up winning those elections. Star voting combines the two. So star voting, which like the very wonky people support, there's not really a lot of empirical implementations of star voting. All the other systems have a lot more like empirical implementation. But star voting basically says, hey, we're going to rank the candidates on a scoring method. So 0 to 5, 0 to 10. And then the top 2 scores. So let's say that, you rank 1 to 5, or you score 1 to 5. The top 2 candidates have 3.2 and 3.1, average score. Those candidates go into a runoff. And then you take all the ballots that were cast and you just 1 for 1. Who had the highest score each ballot? This guy says, I ranked this person a 4, and the other candidate I ranked a 3. Well, the person with the 4 gets 1 vote. And then it's basically just who gets the highest ranking on a ballot-to-ballot basis, majority vote, that person ends up winning. This kind of system, it avoids the spoiler effect. Like, the advantages in theory is that it avoids the spoiler effect. It takes into account the intensity of the passion amongst supporters, and it's relatively satisfying in terms of outcome because the ultimate winner is amongst the 2 highest rated candidates. So everyone generally should be like pretty broadly supportive of whoever ends up winning. And those are the systems that, it seems like those are the main systems people end up proposing. Micah says he's a star voting guy. SDL, what do you think? What's if you had your socialist utopia, how would people vote for their leaders? What would the system be?
So, assuming we still had single member districts, I I don't know whether I've argued in favor of RCV just based on simplicity, just because a lot of people aren't politically engaged. It's one of the simpler systems to involve in. So is approval voting. They're both very simple. I don't know about the combined ones. Like we haven't seen tests of how well people do with those. I will just say that mechanically, once you get to the point of like RCV, approval, star, whatever, you're getting like it's hard. You're not getting too much more representative by choosing the best among these. Like they're all so much better than first past the post. The additional difference is like, I don't know, 5% or whatever in most real elections.
Sure.
So I tend to assume the real thing that matters is how well people understand the voting. Like that, I think that might matter more than however additional representation you are. That's all.
Yeah.
No, I agree. So there is, most people don't know this, there's like different think tanks that support these different types of voting systems. There's of course Fair Vote, which is the biggest of them all. They support ranked choice voting. That's why most people know about it, or like most nerds know about it. Then there's the Equal Vote Coalition, which supports star voting. And then there's the Center for Election Science, and they support approval voting. And all these guys are feuding all the time. Now, the approval voting people and the Equal Vote Coalition people, I'm in their Slack, and the Equal Vote Coalition people, they actually both like each other's systems. Like they like approval voting because they're both range systems. Range voting, star voting, approval voting. Approval voting is basically like range voting in the sense that you're rating your candidates, but you're only rating them on a scale of 0 to 1. Like, do I like you or do I not? Star voting is better than range voting because it gets rid of the risk of what we call bullet voting. See, for a lot of people, there's a tendency to strategically vote and lie on your ballot. So let's say you really like Bernie, but Biden and Trump are on the ballot as well. You might say, well, I'm going to give Bernie a 5, and I'm going to give the other 2 a 0, even though I prefer Biden, because I don't want to help him out. I don't want to help him at all. And I think Bernie can win this, and I could be the difference. So I don't want to help Biden out. With star voting, there's much more of an incentive to rate the other people on your ballot, because if it comes down to a one-on-one race between those 2 other people, your rating of one higher than the other counts as a full vote in their favor. So that's the reason why star voting exists, and most people propose that. But they have an alliance, and they think RCV is like barely better than plurality voting. And the reason why they think it's barely better than plurality voting.
Hold on, really quick, Micah. Let me go on a rant here.
Wait, let him finish.
Okay, go ahead and finish. I'm gonna go on a rant later then.
So I absolutely disagree with that. I propose ranked choice voting. I think that's what we should all unite around because we have the most money and infrastructure, and I think it's easier to explain than approval, even though approval is a more simple process. I think storage is extremely complicated, and no one's ever going to understand it. That being said, their argument is this. Ranked choice voting, there's tons of models that have been done of this. There's some wonky outcomes you can get, and its application in specific places has retained the spoiler effect. In Vermont, they had ranked choice voting for a time in the past, and they had a progressive party, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. One-on-one, the Democrats destroy the Republicans. But since the Democrats didn't have as strong of the people that prefer them as strongly, what ended up happening is people rated, like tons of people did their first choice vote for the Progressive Party. Tons of people did their first choice vote for the Republican Party. And what ended up happening is since the Democratic Party must be eliminated, you ended up redistributing their votes, and the Progressive Party ends up winning, despite the fact that the Democratic Party was the most approved of all 3. And it would have won under these other different voting systems.
Isn't this less of an issue with I haven't actually read the mathematical stuff on this. Isn't this less of an issue if you just force people to rank all candidates?
No. It's absolutely an issue because this is still the spoiler effect. Like the Progressive Party being in there changes the outcome. And actually, their argument is that it has a center squeeze effect. It encourages you to be radical. These kind of moderate candidates that everybody approves of, but nobody like has as their first choice. These guys, like, even though they're the consensus pick, a lot of times they don't make it to those later rounds. They get eliminated because they don't have enough first choice votes. They're everybody's second choice vote, but they're not their first choice. And so all you're left with in those final rounds are the more radical people. And here's the thing. In the vast majority of instances, this is not what happens. But it is true. That's why there's actually a difference between these. But the other thing is, RCV is like really fucking expensive.
Well,
like the actual, it's way more expensive than the other 2 systems. But I don't think it matters.
Is it really? Like the ballots are larger or something? What? What is the
So
cost?
the actual processing, like the actual calculation in the system is much larger because start voting approval voting is the easiest. Approval voting doesn't even require
I'm
new
just
ballots or
asking
new
this because
systems.
I've run like single transferable votes on my laptop. Like I don't understand how it could possibly be expensive. That's what I'm asking.
So RCV requires entirely new systems. It requires new machines, new ballots. Like it requires everything. That's why a lot of bills to support RCV at like the federal level that people propose is just funding stuff because it costs a lot of money. Approval voting advocates will cite the fact that they don't really need anything. Like they don't have to do anything. Even the voter education campaign doesn't really have to exist. If only 10% of people decide to vote for two people, many times that's good enough to get the different outcome you wanted. Our star voting has the same issue as RCV. So
I mean, I'm not sure how convinced I am by like the educational barriers, because like I feel like after a couple elections, people just fucking know, right? Like, I mean, how long is it really gonna take people to like understand star voting? Like, probably not that long, right? It's just a matter of like, can you get them to have the buy-in that causes them to actually support implementing the system? Like, that's the hardest part. But I think at the point of implementation, I mean, it's just not that fucking complicated.
I honestly, I think understanding the justification and like the actual way, because you saw with the New York election and like some of these RCD elections, people are looking at it and they're like, "What's going on? What's all these round things going on? Why is their vote going up? This guy started with the most votes, right?" I think for start voting, a benefit is it's really easy to account. Like it's like this, but like it is a little bit strange that like in the first round we're not actually counting votes, like we're counting stars, and that's also another argument against it. I don't know if it's constitutional.
Well, it's I think it's difficult
Okay.
because, like you said, like we've had what is it, 250 years of sort of American style democracy, which has essentially always been in a base form, first past the post. That's just what people are used to.
Well, actually, we had RCV all around the country for a time, but then it was repealed everywhere.
Well, like the presidential elections have
when-
always been, you know.
Yeah, we actually had
basically
multi-winner
first past.
elections. Like we had single transferable votes in places, ranked choice voting in tons and tons of places, and then it was repealed.
Yeah, but again, like I'm saying,
Do you mean
the
the
biggest
1900s or the 1800s? That's what.
I think it was in like the late 1800s. Oh, actually, I imagine RCV was invented in like the late 1800s, right?
Well, I just because I know the STV movement really kicked off around the same time as the recall movement and the direct vote, like the referendum type movements, and those were all the 1900s. Also, a lot of socialists were
Yeah,
involved.
I imagine it was like the early 1900s when this kind of stuff was being put in
Well,
place.
it sounds like we're all surprisingly on the same page in that ranked choice voting is probably like a good transitionary environment for potentially going to star voting or some better, more sophisticated voting system one day. But I wanted to throw a bit of a curveball to you guys. So I've lied to you and said, "Oh, we're talking voting systems. Like, how do you count the ballots?" But here's my curveball. All right, compulsory voting. Yes or no?
Of course. Yeah, absolutely.
SDL, immediate yes. Micah, how do you feel?
I was thinking about this earlier today. First, the politics of it are completely toxic. So I don't think it's like, but yeah, I think the politics of it are completely toxic. Now, here's the question. Okay, well, does it improve the quality of elections? We all agree that the purpose of these, we want to elect the best people possible, right? Like qualitative, the people who will make the best decisions, right? And democracy is the means by which we do that in a stable, sustainable way. So what does compulsory voting do? It increases turnout, right? Which may make the actual preferences asserted at the ballot box more representative of the population in groups that are historically excluded. But it also means that the average voter education of the electorate is lower, right? And so, well, those two impacts, it depends on the size of both, right? So like if you live in a high voter education country, then I imagine it's definitely a good idea. If you're in a place that has very low voter education, and so what happens is a lot of people come out to vote just to avoid the $20 fine, it's less clear that it's making things better.
I mean, I'll agree with Micah. Both are real effects. I just think that in real countries that have done this, like Australia, I don't think that we've seen like idiocracy take effect or anything. Australian politics are like as dumb as American politics for the large part. Like if anything, we elected Trump. They've never elected anyone quite as dumb as Trump, despite the lack of mandatory voting and the very low turnout over here. So
I would have to look at like the actual expected impact, like over the long haul, and I imagine. Like, would Trump do worse? Like, if we had compulsory voting, or would he have done better? I imagine he would have done better.
Well, in general, what I will say about compulsory voting is that it slightly shifts things left because people who don't vote tend to be young. And I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. It just slightly shifts left.
Yeah.
But the main thing it does is it shifts towards the center. So the average is like slightly left of where it was, but the bulk of the non-voters are in the center. So if you're worried about having like a system which has, like you were worried about radicalism earlier from like RCV encouraging like the middle not to work well. I actually think that if you're worried about that, you should support stuff like compulsory voting because those low education voters tend to be fairly like, they tend to be the apolitical voters who are just somewhere in the middle of like consciousness in their country. So
well, I'm not, I just thought of a different argument that I think the swayables, the independents, they're the most prone to like populist messaging because they like, I don't think that they're just centrist. Like, I don't think most normie independents are centrist. I think they're people that have not really gotten in a message that it was engaging to them.
So what I will say,
unfortunately.
Well, Micah, what always interested me about this argument is I always felt like if you truly believe it, you should just go down the technocracy route and go something like weighted voting. Do something like, oh, you donated to a political party, now you get 2 times votes. You've got a college degree, that's another multiplier on your vote. If you like, very seriously, if you think that expertise and political information is so key, then do the progressive-based version of I
believe in sortition,
test, right?
No, I believe in sortition. I think
But if you're worried about expertise, then sortition is even worse, right?
How can because the deliberative process is like absolutely different from the preference assertion on a general candidate at a ballot box. Like these are just completely 2 different procedures.
No. Okay, let's okay. Just for the audience, let me try and what I would say is 2 examples. Let's imagine you have 100-person like body. I'm imagining what Micah is comparing is you elect 100 people in case 1 in like the democracy case, and in case 2 you randomly select 100 people from the population and they will be the body for say 6 months. Is that a sortition-ish?
Yeah, so that is a citizens assembly laudocratic sortition-based system. Now let me explain to you what the difference is. If somebody has no education, right, and they're just showing up, just random. How about we just take random 100 Americans? We ask them to vote in an election, right, and vote between the candidates. And they come to the ballot box. They don't really know who these people are. Maybe they have like, a couple ads worth of education on these candidates. That's one thing, and right, we can say, well, it would be nice. It would be better if these people were more informed on these candidates. The outcomes would be better. It's another thing to say, this is a different take, that a 100-person body that was brought in, randomly selected, to deliberate over a 6-month period on one issue, with consulting the experts, generally consulting all of the evidence, and engaging in an actual process to have them form a conclusion. That may be better, it's not perfect, may be better than a political system where all of the people who are elected are political actors that have political incentives and are thinking about maybe they're donors and thinking about electability, and they're not so much thinking or concerned about solving an issue. Right. So I think those are 2 mutually compatible takes.
I think to not get sidetracked on sortition, I was just going to add in that, like, I think one thing that would make it very politically, like, I agree with Micah, the idea of like finding people to vote, like, hey, if you don't vote, we're going to charge you $50 or something like that, or like it goes on your tax bill or something. That's just probably difficult to pass. Like, I don't think a lot of people would support such a system, and I think a lot of Democrats would be like, oh, I don't know about this. Like, I feel like there might be some like electoral backlash.
Is if every city in Texas did that, okay? If Austin simply had mandatory voting, I think that would be a really cool idea. Not the red counties; they should stay on voluntary.
I was going
to
say like a thing that could like an alternative that I don't really see a lot of people propose this, but it just kind of makes a lot of sense to me. Is why don't we just pay people who vote? Like, hey, if you vote, we'll give you $100, right? Like.
I support that. Now you get paying people to vote gives you basically like the same thing, but it's much more politically passable. So like let's just establish the pros. I think one of the pros we did not establish is that if you have a mandatory voting system and like that is a legal requirement, it's actually illegal. That basically stops the ability for Republicans to do voter suppression. It's like those people have to vote. So like like all this voter ID laws, like reducing the ability for people to access the ballot box, that stuff's going to be extra popular because you're basically just making it where we find more people.
Well, if anything,
So
it might cause the
that's a
opposite.
good thing.
Republicans might say, like, we need to make it very, very easy to vote because we don't want, like, rural grandmas in, like, the South or some shit to, like, have to drive 25 minutes to the nearest polling location. Like, we have to make it as easy as possible to vote because everyone votes. So, fuck, like, we have to just, it's a pure turnout race at this point, right?
What I will say is that voter suppression has a surprisingly small partisan effect. Like, it's really bad morally, but the partisan effect is way smaller than you'd expect. Like, I think it's on the order of like half a percentage point, which still sways a decent chunk of elections because we're such a partisan country. But if we weren't, if we were like a 60% Republican or 60% Democrat country, it wouldn't matter. So I don't tend to think of this as a voter turnout thing. I tend to think of it another way. It changes politicians' goals from trying to increase turnout to trying to get voters who are swinging to vote for them. That's, I think, the difference.
Well, so voter suppression is only affecting the people on the margins that like might turn out but don't turn out. I think if we got turnout to be 100%, like that would absolutely have crazy partisan impacts, and I think it would overwhelmingly. I think it would probably really benefit Democrats, specifically in Texas. In Texas, I think the Democrats just win if all the Latinos turn out, all the young people turn out.
No, it's a particular. Can I add one historical note? When I say that like the mandatory voting shifted it, say in Australia, that's where it's most studied. It shifted it like, I don't think, like 2 percentage points towards the Labor Party. It would be like a 10-point shift in America towards the Dems because the people who don't vote are disproportionately people who don't speak English and young people. And so like it's an enormously pro-democratic environment. Now, I'm again, not a good or bad reason to do it. Just.
Yeah. Like we're not trying to rig this. Come on, guys. Like we would never do that.
That's a good reason to do it.
I think one of the
Let's do it that way.
I think it fundamentally does change though what campaigns are about. I was just the campaign manager for a city council race, and like all campaign managers will tell you, especially in local races, it's largely a turnout game. You spend so much time just trying to turn out your team that you don't have as much time to do other things, like I don't know, maybe educating the voters. Right? You're just calling the same people, make sure you come out to vote. I think if we had 100% turnout and it was the real population asserting its preference every time, and then we could focus on the voting thing. But yeah, I think in general, compulsory voting or giving people cash would be on a policy side a good idea.
There we go. Some
I will say I go even harder on this. Like Micah's worried about low education voters. I'm of the opinion that you should start doing things like public funded town halls. You should start being like public funded debate clubs. Like we had a lot of these things in old times. So fun etymology fact: the term mental gymnastics was invented by German American leftists who set up gyms. They wanted people to come out and work their muscles, and they would also set aside one day a week for political debates, also called mental gymnastics.
So I'm in favor of that.
Yeah. And so just to me, like all that seems like if you want a truly democratic society, it's not enough just to have people vote. You need to have people be like informed. And so when Micah says, let's do sortition, let's get people educated on individual policy, I agree those people will probably be more educated on like that policy than other voters. But there's also just a benefit to having a high education, highly politically engaged society in general. So I think I would go the other direction.
No.
Yeah. Simply
I agree with you. I think you're right. I think you're No, there's a real question about this though, and this gets into the public financing of elections question. A lot of times people say, "Well, we want to get money out of politics." It has, a negative effect on the actual policies they support. They're so busy they're so busy fundraising, and I think to different degrees, different policies may have different positive impacts. But a lot of the talk is how do we get public dollars in the hands or pockets of campaigns? Now, as we all know, campaign media is not really giving voters general education on the policy differences or qualification differences. A lot of it's rhetoric, right? Like we did campaign ads on our campaign. We sent it to people all over Houston that vote. And what do they say? He's going to be really good on public safety. Like that's not really helping people understand the real policy differences. So I think some sort of public effort, like by public entities, to really put them in environments where you can compare their policy views would be really nice. The only question is how do you administer that? How do we make sure it's not administered in a partisan way? How do we make sure it's actually effective and it doesn't skew or like we can't like no county elects some sort of fascist election clerk that decides to administer these funds in such a way that helps one candidate way more than another.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is generally the argument for public funded media writ large. And so part of the way you do it is you just subsidize media in general. And so like the US did this for a long time. One of the first things the US did, I think it was like 0.5% of our GDP for like the first 100 years of our existence, is we gave free postage to newspapers. And that was an enormous subsidy to newspapers. It was larger than literally anywhere else in the world. And nowadays it'd be equivalent, I think, something like 40 billion, $50 billion. It's like stuff like that, just subsidizing news, I think is it, like, if you want to avoid a partisan way of doing it, you can just like double up the market essentially, which is what they were doing back then. I do think there's also an argument for stuff like voter vouchers. Like you just give people, instead of having it be
Democracy vouchers.
yeah, do democracy vouchers, and then also do news vouchers is the argument, right? Just let people pay to their favorite news station or whatever. Um, Beyond that,
I don't know about that. I don't know. I don't know about whether more consumption of media, I guess maybe paid media, would actually improve voter education so much. I mean, so much of paid political media these days is like the incentive for them is not necessarily to provide you accurate information.
yeah,
And also, how would we vet the
I'm a
news
fan of
companies?
sortition, but for a weird, different way. I want like media review boards, which are sortition based, where like you would get 100 people together and you would be like, okay, does this company deserve public subsidy? And if you could get something like, say, 80% of those people to say no, then that's a way to be like, okay, no more public subsidies going to InfoWars because 80% said no to the InfoWars. Like that's the way you do it to me. It's not that you focus so much on like getting the center to promote information, you get like the crazy fringes sort of excluded. That's the only way I can think of it to work.
I think I'm open minded that that's like so politically irrelevant. It's probably not even worth
No,
it.
of course. Okay.
There you
Mike,
go.
it's
Well, hey,
like, what if we
that's
simply gave 100 people policy making power as sortition? Yeah, I mean, I know all these are sort of
I don't actually advocate sortition as like an institutional thing that we put in place. I think there's a time in politics where we could get like a citizens assembly convene on specific issues, because so many countries have done that. We've actually had citizens assemblies in the United States. I don't think that we could institutionally like replace the Senate with that. Like I wouldn't add, because it's just a waste of time.
One last note on sortition type stuff. Actually, have you read into Taiwanese e-democracy, like the online discussion system at all?
I am vaguely familiar, but I'm vaguely familiar. But feel free to spiel away.
I just bring it up because it's an example of how it's a public funded system. This very specific thing. It's like a website that they have where people can comment on upcoming legislation. So it'll be like there's a bill in the House, and you go to like house.gov/comment or whatever, and then you go and comment on that bill. And what it specifically does is this will sound odd, but do you know Twitter's bridging algorithm, or how it works?
No.
For like so for the community notes, what they try and do is promote notes that people who routinely disagree on notes agree on. So if you routinely have a Republican and a Democrat and they love their perfect notes, and then they come together to agree on one note, they're like, this is the note that probably has truth to it, which is an interesting concept. And so the Taiwanese government has something very similar in their bill comments website, where they show you clusters of people who agree and disagree on bills commonly, and then they show you areas of agreement and disagreement. And so the areas of agreement are often areas that are like accepted by parliament into law, because they're like, hey, everyone actually likes this minor revision or whatever. So there's a lot of other interesting like e-democracy ways to add more public comment. Not quite.
That is why we must give a guarantee of independence to Taiwan and make sure they are never invaded by their communist neighbors.
I wish Taiwan could be independent. In this universe, we will politely say that we respect the status quo and then give them weapons, right?
There you go. Well, all right. I mean, that's
okay,
pretty
guys.
much. Yeah, I was gonna say that's. Yeah, go for it, Aiden. What did you have?
There's so much more.
Before we pivot away from,
there's a lot more to talk about.
I did start this by saying I think single member districts are just the problem in general. Like when Mike was talking about, hey, there's these examples of RCV having these bad outcomes. So something that very, very, very rarely has bad outcomes is single transferable vote. So fair vote, the thing they really advocate is what they call proportional ranked choice voting. Or if you're a nerd and you already know this, it's called single transferable voting. They're the exact same. They just call it proportional ranked choice voting because that way it sells the American public. That's the hope anyway. And their recommendation is very simple. Instead of having one congressional district, just have 5. And then it's very hard for someone to like do strategic voting. You just vote for who's your best, and if you get 20%, they're in.
Well, but the
Just
issue with
ha-
STV though is that it's not like purely proportional, right? Like I would say
it's
that,
close enough.
but there's other systems that could be
can
like
we do a
literally
breakdown of this?
proportional, right? Yeah. So like for the audience,
So-
I guess to move from like voting
Can I do
systems
it?
to
Can I do it?
yeah, the legislative system. Go for it,
Uh-oh.
Micah. Why not?
Yeah, okay, so there's different types of proportional representation. The idea is, generally speaking, that we want the percentage that every party gets to somewhat align with the percentage of seats they get, which is often very different than what actually happens in plurality vote systems. In the United States, because of the fact that Democrats are very concentrated, Republicans are more diffuse, the actual geographic skew of these single member districts benefits disproportionately Republicans. And then people like libertarians and Green Party folks, they get like 2% of the vote, 3% of the vote. They don't get any representation at the national level, despite the fact that like that's a lot of votes. Like maybe those people should be represented. And so there's different ways you could do this. One idea is just strict party votes. Like you just vote for a party, and then we see the percentage breakdown of the different parties. Democrats get 50%, Republicans get 40%, Green Party gets 10%, and we give seats to those parties in those proportions. Some countries do that. There's a division between these different proportional representation systems on how the candidates are chosen. Who chooses these candidates that end up being selected by the parties to go and sit in the legislature? Is it just the party's choice? Does the chairman of the Democratic Party just hand pick all these guys and send them in there, and they're the new Democratic legislatures? Or do the people get to vote? In some places, they have what's called open list PR, open list proportional representation. You vote for your party, and then you vote for the people in that party that you would like to be legislatures. And there's tons of different varieties of this. So some people propose that. Some people support closed list proportional representation, where the party just has all the power. And then there's these two hybrid systems. See, under those forms of proportional representation, there's no geographic representation. If you have an issue, you have no representative that you can call and just be like, hey, there's a pothole on my street. I need it to be fixed. So a lot of folks appreciate having a local representative. And so what SDL mentioned was single transferable vote. That's one idea of doing it. You have like one big district and there's like 5 representatives. And since there's so many, you can have a sort of proportional system, because many times the different population blocks get a person. Now, if let's say only 5% of the population in your district believes something, often they don't get their perfect party representative, but it's pretty proportional. Another idea, which is my favorite system, is mixed member proportional, where basically you vote for a local representative, they win, right? And then you look at the national, so you vote for a local representative and you vote for a party. And basically what happens is we look at all these single winner representatives, all these representatives around the country, and we see how the party split of those representatives is different from the party split of the party vote that people allocated. And we adjust on the back end by allowing the parties that are underrepresented to appoint new representatives to make sure it's proportional. That everybody also has a single, like a local representative that represents their district.
There you go. That's a summary. I mean, STV is bad. I was gonna say that's why I prefer MMP or like a pure. I like just pure proportional representation. I think local, districts are kind of not like overrated, but like I just like proportional representation. Let's just make it easy.
So I'm a fan of proportional representation, but I think it's very unlikely in this country we're going to see it with anything short of like 75% support for it and like a movement for it and like a constitutional convention or something. Like it's just very hard to see. So the reason that Fair Vote talks about PRCV, proportional ranked choice vote, is because it's something that states could actually just do like right now.
It's like it's actually legal. Like even MMP, like I don't think that you can constitutionally have a system in most states where the parties are choosing some of the representatives.
Yeah. So PRCV is it's the compromise with, we have a 250-year-old document. But I do like, personally, I would like PR. I go between the open and closed list one. And one of the reasons that I talked about earlier for why I like democracy is because it tends to rotate who has power. One of the big problems with democracies that don't rotate power is that they can become authoritarian. And so I've advocated actually for a weird thing. So in a lot of systems that have proportional representation, you have to get above X% to get any seats. So if you have less than 2% of the vote, your votes just are cast into the void. Or in some systems, they go to your next favorite party, like your number 2 party. Okay, I've proposed that there should be a ceiling, that you should only be able to get something like 20% of the vote. And then your vote, if you go above that, should go to your next favorite party. Because I don't want any party to have monopoly control over this stuff. And so in that system where it's very hard for one party to have power, I feel like I'm way more comfortable with closed vote systems, because then like it's, so what if the party's choosing their own seats? You know, you can just pick the next favorite party. They've only got a fifth of the seats anyway. They're not too big a threat.
Well, but
You know, how bad
the
can they
issue with
be?
that though is that like it's just like very unnecessary. I think like every single proportional or like MMP system is like a very robust multi-party democracy, and I just don't like if we implemented something like that in America. I think there'd probably be like a few elections where Democrats and Republicans still dominated, but I think eventually you'd see party split and you'd see, you know, coalition government.
Eventually, but what I will say is that places that have just done RCV, like not PRCV, but just RCV, like Australia, they really still only have a 2-party system. It's like 85% 2-party. So I would like to see more breakup is all.
So one of my issues with PR for the United States is we have bicameralism, whether we like it or not.
Kill the Senate.
That means that like parties have like the people that run parties. If you have like a closed list system or even an open list system, the parties have a lot of power, and they're going to act in their own interest. And their own interest isn't really to compromise on a lot of stuff. Right? And that's why in most parliamentary democracies, you have a coalition-based system where enough parties come together, they make an agreement, they're going to work together on everything, and they're going to form a government. The issue is, since we have two different bodies, many times we're going to have split governments, and there's no way to do this partisan makeup for the Senate. So like you're going to have like this super partisan incentives in the House, and you're not going to have those same partisan incentives in the Senate. And I think that there's going to be a lot of room for parties just to kind of support gridlock. Gridlock in many cases is going to benefit you more. And even if you could, like, there's not going to be much room to break that gridlock because the parties have so much power. And so that's why I think like a single transferable vote, I still think that's a reach. Or just ranked choice voting. Like, we'll elect enough people who are willing to compromise that you can have split governments that are actually functional. I mean, right now, whenever you lose the midterms, like when Biden lost the midterms, the House, nothing for 2 years. 3 bills passed. And so I think the most important thing that we need to do in this country is just get rid of those partisan primaries, put in place ranked choice voting. That's by far the most important thing. And then you'll actually have an incentive for elected officials to compromise.
I mean, I don't know that the incentive is there for compromise, even with something like ranked choice voting. Like you're still winning based on a lot of people really liking your politics, right? It's not about results per se. Like there's a reason that states are just red states forever until they fuck it up way too bad, even though we think their politics are like objectively bad for people.
So primary voters are the ones who punish you for compromising. That's usually against you in the primary. The general electorate is not the one who punishes you for compromising. The general electorate is usually the one who likes it whenever you say you reached across the aisle, because there's all types of people.
Sure,
it's usually a vote gainer. That's why you see places like, what are the places that have RCD? Alaska and Maine. Which are the few elected officials in this country which cross party lines the most? Yeah, in Maine and Alaska.
Well, I think it's hard to look at those because they both actually have a unique political culture. Like Alaska's just really weird in general, only state in the country with a UBI. But Maine is like almost a swing state. It's like already going to be one of the states where you're going to select those people. And I would just note that like, you know, there's RCV in cities for plenty of city council positions, and you still get the sort of same gridlock. I tend to think that gridlock is like, it's escapable mostly by doing unicameralism and having a competitive party system. Like the way you avoid it is by as much as possible making it so there's few checks on your power, and then having it so that you either slightly hold power or you don't hold power, and you use that power to achieve your political goals. Like it's sort of what you see in places like, Minnesota, where Democrats get slightly enough power. They've got a whole bunch of progressive orgs backing them up, and then they've got progressive Democrats in power, and they just pass like 50 policies all at once. That's actually a good example of democracy functioning, even if you don't like their policies, because that'll let voters say, hey, the Democrats are doing what they said they did. Do I like that or not? Yes or no, like thumb up or down. So I think really it is all about veto points, and it doesn't really matter about the voting system you get there. or stuff like
No,
that.
I think partisan primaries certainly have like a very negative effect on reaching across the aisle. I think like whenever you see people being punished for votes they take, it's going to be in the primary. It's not in the. It's
Sure,
not
but you can't
really
get rid of
in
the
the
party
general election.
primaries. Like you just
Yeah, well, absolutely you can. Yeah, you have plenty of places have incorporated jungle primaries, and in the RCV states they don't have like Alaska doesn't have a partisan primary anymore, does it? It does not, and I don't think Maine does either. New York
sure.
City they did
I'm
it in
saying
their primary.
I think the partisan primary isn't a thing that you can legally ban because it's like a private organization thing. I'm just saying you can functionally make it matter less by doing stuff like jungle or top two, even like what California does. But
Wait, yeah. Well, what I'm saying is like, well, you can switch your process where you get rid of primaries. Now, like, you know, yeah, you can actually. Like, they can still do caucuses, but primaries requires the local government to support it because it's using government ballots. So yeah, you can. The government controls the primary system. It doesn't control caucuses.
so okay, this is a weird thing about U.S. history. It does, but it didn't used to. And like theoretically, parties could go back to what they used to back in the 30s. So back in the
Yeah, but they're not gonna do
basically the reason that we have government supported primaries is because the socialists did too well. And I'm not trying to like exaggerate the history here. It's socialists were doing too well in the 10s, 20s, and 30s, and so they decided to really formalize the two party system, which made the Dems not lose elections because socialists took too many of their votes. And so like
based. That's so based.
mechanically that's why it's happened. That's part of the reason we have such a strong two-party system is the Socialist Party only got like 15% of the vote or 20% of the vote or 25%, but they never got like this good 40, 50, 60. So they never took off.
So based.
I just wonder.
Oh
I
my
wonder
God.
if we had like across the board jungle primaries. Like I wonder how that would, especially with ranked choice voting and like no runoff, which is seems like where you're leaning, Micah. Like I wonder how that would affect internal party dynamics because like let's say that we had like the California system, but there was only one round. I wonder how competitive from a partisan perspective it would even be. Like would it just be like basically the insiders picking the candidates anyway? Because I imagine if we had that system, there would be like a really large amount of institutional let's say like gatekeeping for resources because well what the fuck, like no Katie Porter and fucking Barbara Lee, we don't want you running for the US Senate. Like we need our one single Democrat getting all the first place ranks and going from there. Fuck you, like that would be pretty tough.
So what I imagine, I mean, look at Alaska. Does Alaska have a first round, like a top 5?
They do, yeah. So in
primary round?
Alaska, they have basically where they have a kind of a jungle primary, and then the top 4 candidates go into a ranked choice runoff.
Yeah,
it's kind of a bizarre system.
I'm a fan of the top 5 primary system. I do think you need 2 rounds just to narrow it down, but while giving you an array of choices and not have voter overload. And I think in that case, like each candidate's going to get their own niche, and it's going to be a real dogfight to get in there.
I mean, obviously, like the Alaskan ranked choice voting has like very immediately resulted in more optimal electoral outcomes where like in the previous system, Sarah Palin probably would have won that election and become like the at-large representative. But because of the ranked choice system, a more moderate Democrat ends up winning. And then Lisa Murkowski, a very moderate Republican, she ends up winning her most recent election when everyone said, oh, Lisa Murkowski's fucked. She's one of the most anti-Trump Republicans. She's going to get primary. But then they just like got rid of primaries basically. And so then she ends up winning, which was kind of the story of Lisa Murkowski's what was it, like her 2010 race where she actually did get primaried in 2010 and she lost that primary, but then she just won a write-in campaign. Like she's very stubbornly held on to this seat. And so I don't know. Yeah, I agree that the system that you're describing, like kind of the Alaskan model, it would obviously be better than what we have now. So
and I think it'd be a huge thing. I mean, like I think that the primary RCV is just a better process to avoid like spoilers and runoffs and that kind of stuff. It's the big thing is not that it's changing the primary system. That's what's going to have the biggest impact because a person like Trump never becomes president without a primary system. Yeah, like he just does not. RCV helps with that as well. The other thing is reducing the power of the speaker in terms of his agenda setting power is really important as well. I mean, we have a dictator speaker, generally speaking. I mean, Kevin McCarthy was an example of that not necessarily being the case, but they have like complete control of the agenda, generally speaking. And that's really bad because that means like the minority party, even if they can get like 20 Republicans, just never gets a vote on the stuff that they're supporting. And so if we can allow representatives to add items to the agenda, if it's like 30 representatives, without the partisan primaries, with all this other stuff changed, now you can actually have split governments that are functional. We're not going to get rid of the Senate SDL. So we have to think about how we can make this system as functional as possible.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you. We're not going to get rid of it. It's a dream. Yeah, I mean, the lack of agenda setting power by minor parties is a big problem. The partisan polarity is a really big problem as well. The polarization of elections. Basically, so the way I think of it is that we really have two first past the post elections, right? We have a first past the post election, first among the Republicans and then first among the Democrats. And then the results of those go to the next level. And so you already have people who will tend to be in like the middle of the 50% of the left of the country, 50% of the right of the country. So you very rarely get like a quote unquote middle candidate. So it does result in a really bad governing structure. I will agree.
And the way that you win primaries is like, go ahead.
Go ahead. No. I was going to say I want Democrats to win all the time. That's it.
Yeah, I know. I mean, the way that you win primaries is like I think the partisan primary voters, because of I think largely media polarization, are very much like groupthink. We're blue team, they're red team, so they must be bad. And like that's true right now. We're on blue team. True. But like the way that you set yourself up to win a primary, we see this all the time, is you attack the other team like there's no tomorrow. Like that's what Republicans do. Like and that kind of rhetoric and that kind of strategy, what leads to that stays with the politician once they're in office. So all these political leaders, which are in their media, are perpetuating like this narrative because it personally benefits them. That is inherently polarizing.
I really don't think that's due to the speech during the campaign trail or whatever. Like if you look in U.S. history, there's been really, really, really divisive rhetoric and even interpersonal feuds in like the Senate and whatnot, right? Very famously, there have been fights in the Senate and killings in the Senate. Not killings, but fights. I want to say killing because the guy that got caned was like disabled for like 2 or 3 years or something. He went on like a trip to France. He had to come back. Anyway, whole thing. Point was just like, I don't think it's that causes lack of governability. I think it really just does come down to like party preferences within primaries. And I would note that a lot of the interpersonal feuding comes from like social media and the media environment we live in, which is very fragmented. Like the reason that Ted Cruz wants to vote in the Senate. Go ahead.
Well, I'm like, just to clarify what I was saying, I'm not saying like, I'm a little bit confused about what you think my claim is. Like, whenever you watch the 2016 Republican debates, what do they all say? Well, here's what unites us. The Democrats are evil and Obama's a Muslim, right? And like that helps you win primaries. And like that rhetoric matters. So many people that watch that stuff. So not only like does it incentivize them to do bad policies, the very process, the very political incentives is like a self-fulfilling prophecy of all these primary voters, I think, becoming increasingly radicalized against the other party and thinking they are so evil and they are so wrong and they are so bad.
What I was trying to say is, so this is sort of a question whether it's like demand-driven or supply-driven. And I'm saying I think there's these
both.
Well, it's both, but I'm saying I think it's really significantly demand-driven. That like people love that kind of rhetoric, and it's not just because of how primaries work. It's like there's a whole market for it. There's a reason that people constantly produce those clips after the election, right? They don't stop in the election; they do it on the Senate floor. They're constantly getting their owns from the Senate floor, their owns from the House chamber, and that's because people are watching it. It's not like just because of how primaries work. So
but then we went on a primary again.
I know, but I know. I mean, that's fair. Good point. But I guess I'm just trying to say like. Look at how when Fox got too moderate, then people all shifted to OANN, right? It's not just a politician thing. It's like a voter thing as well. Like when you look at Pew's estimates of who voters are, I call it like the V curve, that in like the 90s, there was roughly as many people on like the quote unquote left as on the right as on the center. But nowadays among like politically engaged voters, it's like all on the left, all on the right. And by left and right, I mean like liberals and Republicans type thing. But I can send you the graph.
Bunch of socialists and fascists.
Yeah, that's true. When I say right, I mean they're all fascists. I mean a lot of them. Good 30%. Whatever. I guess I'm more skeptical that we can absolve that with just voting system changes. I tend to think that this is a real ideology change that we're seeing.
Well, so we need to change the media incentives too. But let's just moral of the story. We support ranked choice voting. If we can get single transferable vote, that would be nice. I think, you know what? Let me actually make an argument against single transferable vote so we can just end this argument. Because I'm a little bit... So, like, it takes political capital to get things done. I am, like, not that convinced that single transferable vote will be dramatically better in just ranked choice voting. I don't think the actual proportionality difference will be huge. I don't think I think it may change a couple of seats. So on the margin, it might affect a couple of elections. The big thing is voter education's already really low because we have super, super long ballots. If we have multiple Democrats in the election and we have like 20 people on the ballot for one race, if there's 5 winners, right? Or like maybe 15 people, I imagine like the amount of voter education and the quality here is like going to be really low. Like, it's going to be really hard to keep track of this stuff. So I don't see what the huge benefit is here. So you're reducing the quality of like the actual voter education and informed decision. The process is more complicated than RCV, and it costs a lot of political capital. Benefit is it becomes slightly more proportional.
It's really not much harder than STV versus RCV is very for elections with not many candidates. It's not very much different. With RCV, you just do like 1, 2, 3, and STV it would be like 9 candidates instead. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's a problem for when you get really large ballots. So I think Ireland is a country which does proportional ranked choice voting, and they have you can see like some pictures of like enormous ballots and stuff. But
yeah. I mean, there's 5 winners because like you need 5 winners for it to be really like if you have only 3, then I mean, I guess it'll have some impact, but
well, so it would be weird to do it in the US because the ability that you could do a large number of winners would depend by state. So if you did like Delaware House elections, they could do as much as they wanted. They still only have 1 representative. So it doesn't matter how proportional they make it, like big L for you. But for places like California and Texas, they could like subdivide it up into 5, 5, 5, 5 or whatever. And yeah, I will just say that like when you ask like is there an appetite for other parties, I think like a lot of Americans say the answer is yes, and I just assume that people don't do that because they know it's a bad choice. Like people are like relatively sane in their voting choices. And so like there's a lot of appetite. There's a lot of appetite for especially a centrist party, but I know there's also a lot of appetite for like left parties as well. Like the Greens are the second most well-performing party, despite the fact that they're completely electorally unviable. So the fact that people are still doing this, like regardless, indicates to me there's some appetite for it. I don't know.
I mean, undoubtedly in any of these systems,
I think they'd win
propose,
some stuff in RCV.
Like, undoubtedly in any of these systems we propose, there would be like substantially more third-party representation, and by that we mean like more than 0, basically. Like there would actually probably be like a couple Green members of the House, maybe 3 or 4.
Can I give you all a stat?
Yeah, sure.
So there's something I think it's 80,000 elected positions. No, that's not true. There's 800,000 elected positions in the United States, and of those, I think it's something like I think it's 10,000 are like state legislature or higher. What percent do you think are from third parties?
It's like 1 in 1,000, I assume. Like, there's really not that many in state legislatures or hires.
I think it's exactly like 0.1% or something, and virtually all of that is
switching parties
like Vermont
in office
stuff. Yeah, it's abysmal.
Well, like it seems like a lot of the times when you see like, oh, there's a libertarian member of the House in New Hampshire, and like the answer is, oh, well, he got elected and then switched libertarian and then immediately lost when he ran as a libertarian.
Yeah, no. So when you look at the Green, no. So if you go, I curate this Wikipedia page for a reason. If you go to the list of Green electeds, every single one who was elected to a state legislature, except one, was originally elected as a Democrat. Like only one person has won a state legislature election on the Green ballot. Literally one person. It's like abysmal. That's actually not true. There's a second person who ran on a Green ballot after he did felony fraud and got expelled from the Democrats. But then people loved him so much that they elected him on a Green ticket. So 2 people.
Well, Howie Hawkins is really a drag on the ballot, I guess.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I think
that's
and
insane.
that just goes back to like one of my. Like my biggest criticism for I mean, obviously none of us like the Electoral College. We didn't say that, but I mean, come on, guys, the Electoral College is completely ridiculous. But
no, you have to be stupid. It's like
one of the problems.
The Electoral College, first past the post is it's so cool. I just love doing it twice. Right?
No, the Electoral College, like one of the problems with the Electoral College, gerrymandering, primary systems basically that we have now. Fundamentally, it's just that people just don't feel like their will is represented. Like they feel like their vote just like doesn't translate into not only like the candidates in the primaries, but also just like obviously after the fact, like the candidates that they have the options to choose from. And so, yeah, if we had literally any combination of the things that we are talking about, I think that would get a lot better. I think with STV, like, yeah, that does it gives me pause because I think that it's like sufficiently confusing on how winners are determined, because when you get into like the fraction of the ballots and the redistribution of votes, when someone, goes past a threshold, it's like, wait, somebody won with 80,324.87 votes. Like, what the fuck does that, like, it gets like a little bit more confusing, right?
To speak to that a little bit, so the DSA for virtually all elections internally uses STV. And so just like mechanically, I will tell you that the way that you talk to voters within the DSA or whatever is you say, just rank the candidate. You don't talk about how any of the redistribution works. You say, just rank this guy 1, this guy 2, this guy 3. It's that simple. It's not much more complicated than when European parties say vote like list A or whatever. It's like it's very short.
I agree. It's just I do, and again, I think STV would be a lot better than what we have now. It's just that I do think that there's a question of satisfaction versus what Mike is proposing. And like what would lead to the best satisfaction, and if the voters are able to really understand not only how to vote, which I agree, like it's easy enough just to rank like 1 to 20 or something, like that's not that complicated, but also, hey, this is like how your vote translates into an outcome, like that's a little bit easier under Micah's system, right?
Well, and also having a developed opinion on 20, like, listen, guys, it is so hard, especially for a lot of these races, to get somebody to understand which person they're supposed to vote for on like just one person on the ballot. 5, okay, 20 people or 15 people, and doing this like for different things for state ledge too. I get it, okay? Like I get it. It makes sense. I think we have to choose our battles. In my opinion, ending partisan gerrymandering, top 5 primaries with top 5 nonpartisan primaries, ranked choice voting. There's a lot of stuff like this, even like maybe democracy vouchers. Just the ROI on that and the political achievability of that is like much higher than things like single transferable vote. So I'm not against it, but I think like that is low on my list of priorities.
I guess one of the reasons that I push for stuff like this is speaking of state legislatures again, I mentioned that only like 0.1% are not Demo or Republican. There's an additional 0.5% that are DSA. Part of the reason that I push for like groups like these is they're groups that have an incentive to want to push for alternative voting systems. I think part of the reason that I support stuff like RCV is it's a stepping stone where now you're going to have more people who might want to expand that system. Like there's more people who, were RCV to be abolished, wouldn't be elected. They're either centrists or they're on the far right or far left, and they wouldn't win in a system where it went back to the Democrat and Republican. And so like I do think this is a long plan or something towards an actually proportionally representative system, because like just mechanically,
you're right. If we have RCV, you might get like 20% of people who are from like small parties who would see the benefit a lot from doing a proportional representation system, and they can force a referendum or something like that. But then you're making my point. This is a battle that we will fight once we win this other battle that we're not really winning very like RCV fight is going very slow, dog.
Yeah, well, the issue with enacting any of this is that it's the same thing in tweets. Yeah, go on this. Yeah.
No. One of my favorite tweets from Conyer, who's a lefty streamer, it reads like this: third parties, here the Green Party, would see better results if they converted their entire party apparatus to ranked choice vote advocacy rather than fruitlessly running over and over again in a first past the post system. Which is like, yes, absolutely, this should be like a main part of
didn't I just tweet that? Just tweet something just
well, that's where you got it from, obviously. It was Conyer.
So. Yeah, this is from 2020.
Yeah, it's so real.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I think the issue with, like, you see this a lot in parliamentary systems with first past the post, where, like, in the UK and in Canada, there's pretty much consistently always a generic push to go towards MMP or STV or pure proportional representation or something like that. But as soon as the party that like advocates for that wins in the first past the post system, they're like, well, why the fuck do we need that? We already won without the proportional representation. That's what happens with the Labour Party in the UK. That's what happens with the Liberal Party in Canada. And so, with Democrats, like, obviously we all like hate the Electoral College and it hurts us, but it seems like whenever there's a Democratic president, it's just like, oh yeah, like the 138,000th thing that I need to do as president is like deal with the Electoral College. It's just never a priority.
I actually don't think it's I'm even harsher on this towards the Democrats. When you look at places like I think it's DC, where Democrats are currently trying to take off a referendum for ranked choice vote from the ballot. I might be totally fucking that up, but there was something to the tune of.
No, you're right. You're right. No, you're right.
And so my point is just I don't think it's a Dem versus Republican thing. Dems are better on ranked choice vote, but they're like 10% better or something. Because
I don't know about that.
It's not a lot better.
Look at Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, the current governor, she was the attorney general at the time, and Elizabeth Warren endorsed the RCV referendum that they got on the ballot, and they campaigned for it. In Colorado, Jared Polis and Michael Bennet have spoken out in favor of ranked choice voting. In Alaska and Maine, I think it's the Democratic Party that's defending it. Some states were bad, some states were not.
In Alaska and Maine, it's more. It wasn't just it. Like a lot of Dems were against it, but it's the average portion of Dems for it is much higher than the average portion of Republicans for it. That's all I'll say. Like for reference, in that DC one, while the DC Democrats are suing to keep it off, guess who else is? The DC fucking Republicans, even though they have no goddamn power because they hate ranked choice votes so goddamn much that even in a system they always lose in, they're still trying to kill it. So like, yes, this is a case where Democrats are better. I think this is a case where this is okay. Fancy term, party surrogate strategy is sort of like where some of the consensus in the DSA is formed. Why am I mentioning this? The idea is there's an old debate going back like 50 years now between the inside and outside strategy. Do you get into the Democratic Party and try and fix them, or do you stay on the outside and try and pull them left? And here we could think of this as pulling them towards ranked choice voting, right? It doesn't have to be left. And the answer is that I think you need both. You need candidates who like ranked choice vote, and you also need something outside that needs to make that demand. So ideally what you want is like labor unions that demand ranked choice vote. You need like basically like tenants advocacy groups and like who are the stalwarts of the Democratic Party? You need like black churches, you need like labor union votes, you need like progressive voters in general to think this is really important. Like I don't know how.
Well, so what you need, you need people in the party that want it, right? Like so you need candidates that like the idea, right? And then you need a bunch of people, like a lot of voters that are convinced the idea is good, and they'll reward and like they'll put pressure on the candidates to do it. Like usually you're never going to make it popular enough where you can force the elected officials' hands. Now, a lot of times you can get an elected official that runs and they run on it and they make it popular in the process and they like it. And that's an effective strategy as well. I think the problem with a lot of this advocacy is that like if you're in a blue state and you're advocating for ranked choice voting and you're fighting against the Democratic Party, you're going to lose probably. So what you need to do is you need an internal party strategy. Like you got to get people in the Democratic Party in leadership that like this idea so they can make sure the party at least doesn't fight against it.
Well, and so that's why I bring it up, because I think this is a twofold thing. I think there's no route to like nationwide ranked choice vote where you don't take over one of the parties and have an anchor by which to pull the party towards ranked choice vote. That's sort of the argument, that you can't win just from the outside. You will always lose. And you can't just win from the inside, because sort of what Econoboy and I was talking about with DC, like if you get into the party, then you'll still never do it because the party benefits too much from ranked choice vote. You need some combination of pressure inside and outside. And I think like Massachusetts is an example where the people voted against ranked choice vote, right? Like you also need popular support.
Yeah.
So the three stools here are like institutional support outside, institutional support inside the Democratic Party, and like people actually watching it. So
yeah, that's an important one. You know, I think and ultimately it's always going to be the Democrats. Like I don't see the Republicans ever passing this stuff unless it's an initiative referendum. So in initiative referendum states, the strategy completely changes. Who even cares? Like their lawsuits, I think almost always fail. Like it's ranked choice voting is just established precedent for so long. So just get it on your ballot and make sure everybody votes for it, and you don't even have to worry about them.
Well, maybe this is something you can push for within the Center for Neoliberalism. Oh, I'm sorry, the Center for New Liberalism, teehee. And I know it's something I wanted to push for within DSA was explicitly trying to do ranked choice vote initiatives in the 20 or so states that have them, that have the referendum process.
Oh, well, you know, fair vote's probably the right mechanism for you if you're especially trying to convince voters, you want a nonpartisan brand.
No, I agree. You want to do it through like you can't do it through, you can't be like, and the socialists want ranked choice vote. I totally agree. Nor really can you be like, and the neoliberals want ranked choice vote. I think that either way is the way to sink the ship.
The neoliberals yearn for ranked choice voting.
The neoliberal socialist coalition winning yet again.
There you go.
I do agree, but I will just say that like part of the reason that initiatives don't happen is because you need a lot of signatures, and so you need like mass membership groups. So who does that? Again, you're looking at groups like the DSA. You're looking at like labor unions. That's who you have to win over if you want to get a lot of signatures. Or just
that's a good point.
There we go, guys.
So, guys, the
I think
conclusion. What is the conclusion?
What is the
Cameron,
conclusion?
of our elections? Our election conclusions is that ranked choice voting is good. Gerrymandering
Ranked
is bad.
choice voting is a
Electoral college
good
bad.
strategic option. Primaries are bad, and we do need some sort of proportional representation. Would probably be better. I think those are the soft,
Maybe
horizontal conclusions of the three of us. Yeah, well, all right, guys, let's close out the show. It was a great first show. I mean, I didn't expect mostly we would talk about voting systems and legislative systems, but here we are. That's just what the hosts were feeling today. In the next 2 weeks, who knows what we'll talk about? It could be fucking anything. I'm thinking we should do a score voting on different forms of taxes, and we could try to determine who has
a good idea.
What are the best taxes. I'm sure you and Micah will disagree on wealth taxes, and I'll probably say income taxes are based, and Micah will say they're cringe, and that'd be a good little thing we could do. That'd be a good idea for a topic.
It's very simple for me. I'll just put a check under all of the taxes, right? I'm a true Medlock fan. I'm a tax positive.
10 out of 10 on every form of taxation. But anyway, well, yeah, I guess as we close out, just a reminder, our Patreon, Discord, Reddit, join all those things, support the show if you want. This is our first episode, obviously. I thought it went pretty well. And so if you like these kind of, dense policy discussions, let us know by joining those things and interacting and whatnot. You can also follow us, the Three Wonks, on Twitter, at the Three Wonks on Twitter. Somebody stole Three Wonks on Twitter. I don't even know who they are, but we weren't able to get that account. So we've been relegated to the Three Wonks on Twitter, unfortunately.
We could
another thing,
real Three Wonks.
That's true. We could put real Three Wonks, just like at real Donald Trump on Twitter.
Right.
And one thing that we were gonna do is if there's any specific subjects that you guys wanted us to cover, just email us. So we have an email, it's 3wonks@gmail. We were able to get original 3wonks@gmail.com. And so email 3wonks@gmail.com. Tell us whatever you want us to talk about. And we have an idea of kind of compiling, different things that people suggest, allowing Patreon members to vote on it. And so each show will try to do an audience topic that we talk about, which could be completely out of left field. But who knows? It's all what the Patreons vote on, I guess.
Can I suggest something, Econoboy, that I was thinking about?
Of course, SEL. This is your show too.
So true, right? This is a worker cooperative right here, as Micah always loves it. This being a worker cooperative makes it even more efficient than if it was top down.
Cooperatively run podcast.
So just something that I was thinking about is that I think I've seen effectively done, the deprogram, the Marxist-Leninist podcast those three people do. I was thinking about it because it's three. And I think something that they do effectively is they'll pick one topic and everyone will have basically it'll be a 20-minute story. For them, it's simple because they're all just agreeing on it or whatever. So they'll have a 20-minute thing where one person tells an interesting sub-story, sub-narrative, sub-piece of evidence towards that general story. And I was wondering if something like that might make sense for this. If we have one topic and then each of us will have here's the perspective we want to add to it. Here's a paper, here's a general theoretical reason to support or oppose something along those lines. I don't know if you want to do multiple topics per episode. If that was
it'd be fun as hell. Yeah, let's do multiple topics. I mean, we did multiple topics today, so I mean, I think that works out. And these are some good clips that we can upload later. So yeah, Micah, go for it.
I think for us, it's never going to be super visually interesting. I imagine we could do editing to make it look better, but I don't imagine a lot of people are just going to be looking at this. They're going to be listening to this. So I'd like it to be a routine thing. I listen to Pod Save America all the time. So we can have some sort of what I was thinking is we start with a very topical subject, then we have a wonkish subject because that's what we're really unique. We provide a very unique outlook on policy issues. We can make people more informed on it. Then the third thing is an audience subject every time, and that can be our constant procedure. Now, one thing that I think that we need to all figure out, we can figure this out off stream, is how we organize these things because I think it could seem a little bit disorganized, and also. I think for a section there, maybe the audience is just way smarter than I am.
No, I think that was
me and STL were
talking about inflation.
Me and STL were speaking we were speaking another language.
Well, that's just because you and STL are too econ brained. Okay, you've got to get outside of your economics education and go and get a job and work in the real world, and then you'll understand how the fucking economy works, Micah and SDO.
No,
right?
so like part of the reason I was talking about having that like one topic, three perspectives type thing was because that might encourage, especially if we do like a Google Doc or something where like we've got the one topic, we'll put our three perspectives in, we'll put like maybe some of the research notes or papers we want to go over, then that might encourage to have more prepared thoughts on this because I didn't have a particularly prepared thought on like, well, what if big regulatory change caused price changes and demand go down too much or whatever. I wasn't speaking particularly clearly on that.
Well, in general, we had a shorter lead up than we'll normally have on these shows. So like we'll have like more like headwind in terms of topics and what we're discussing, and so hopefully we'll be able to come to each show better and better prepared each week. And so yeah, the format that you're talking about isn't unreasonable. I think that's not a bad idea. But anyway, I guess I wanted to also say my plan originally for the show was kind of be a bi-weekly thing, which is to say every other week. And to the audience, if you can't make the live show, just subscribe to our YouTube channel at 3 Wonks on YouTube. We got the original one there as well, where we're planning to post segments. So if you can't make the weekly live show or the bi-weekly live show, just subscribe to the YouTube and the clips will get posted later. And so that'll be a fun little outlet. And I also wanted to say briefly, shout out to Elias Jackson. So one of the benefits that we're running on our Patreon is a shout out at the end of our shows. And so thanks to the earliest of supporters who as soon as I announced the Patreon, we've already had a couple people become Patreon. So thanks to Elias Jackson for becoming a $10 member and taking a shot on this completely unproven program. And so that's that's awesome. That's our number
awesome.
one. That's our number one fan right there is Elias Jackson. So
yet more proof that worker cooperatives, they drive investors. They love it. They love to see it.
It's true. Well, hey, I mean that seems like a good clip. Go on, Micah.
Well, yeah, what I think that we're going to need to do, because so many of these topics are very wonky, is we're going to need to provide like notes about the thing that we're speaking about in terms of its description. Like for Javier Milei's, for instance, we could have provided like a list of everything that he's trying to do, and we could have broken that up into chunks. We explain it, then we talk about it, and then. Yeah, I think we have to like unite on like a narrative, a description of what the facts are, and then one of us explains it each time, and then we talk about it. Because I think otherwise, if we're just kind of like jumping all over the place, it will be hard to track.
Well, the voting systems topic was a little bit all over the place because I threw in the wrench there. But the other topics, like I feel like I was going pretty question by question. Like Javier Milei is doing this. He wants to privatize industry, tax exports. So many, this is foreign policy. So that was all I think pretty well organized. I think that's a good like basic structure to figure out, or to start with and just go from there.
Let's think about I think about me and STL's discussion on socialism. I remember there's a lot of topics that are kind of like that. Like, what is the motivational model for like how cooperative behavior works? That's super important to like the question about whether like a co-op based system works or not. But like it almost seems like we have to convene ahead of time and like hash out like, okay, what is the way that we're going to explain this? What is the descriptive facts that we can unite on? And then we can bring the evidence to the table for two different theories that people understand.
Well, and that's kind of why I was suggesting, like, you almost want an agenda beforehand, and then like, you've got a list of steps, and then people might add like, here's an article or whatever. And we might have to do something like, if you want to cite an article, you've got to briefly explain it or something. I'm not sure, but
yeah, that wouldn't be a bad idea. Well, hey, we'll figure it out. I mean, this was a pretty good look. This was a good first show. All right, We're doing great. We're killing it. All right, we have Elias Jackson bankrolling us. Okay, first Patreon $10 member. Okay, unbelievable.
Love
Split 3
Elias.
ways. We made $3.
Number one Jackson.
Yeah, number one Jackson, member of the Jackson family. But well, anyway, guys, any last minute stuff to point out, to say that you want to mention before we hang up here for the first time?
So, in conclusion, RCV is good. Javier Milei is bringing based capitalism to socialist Argentina. Socialism is bad and it killed 100 gazillion people. And we should do more democracy, and Joe Biden's going to win.
And Biden's going to win. There you go. What about you, Aiden? Anything else?
I'm dooming. I'm coping. Fascism's coming to America.
It's already come to Argentina, apparently. Goodness.
Yeah, apparently.
Someone
Yeah, I
asks,
mean, I
are you
guess
planning to do this in the future, the same day of the week? So yeah, the plan is that Saturday, like early afternoon, late morning is probably going to be the time that we do it. So,
and I'm down to do it every week.
yeah, we'll figure it out. I mean, whatever the interval works for the three of us. Aiden, any last things?
I guess just if you value stuff like ranked choice voting, I would encourage you to join an organization. I would mention the DSA, but there's other groups like Our Revolution that also do a lot of work related to this. So, just
Fair Vote. Join Fair Vote.
Well, I don't think so. I would say join Fair Vote, but I don't think they do much beyond like their membership isn't engaged in activity on an everyday basis. That's what I don't think it's a mass membership organization.
Look, before we get into a debate on which organizations are best, let's just agree that electoralism is a lie, voting doesn't matter, and we should just focus on mutual aid, based.
So
and
pretty much everywhere that has gotten RCV passes because of a grassroots campaign organized by Fair Vote. That's my understanding, and they do grassroots campaigns.
You're breaking through. You're breaking through. You're breaking through the conclusion of the show. We gotta end this piece.
Okay, bye guys. Love you.
All right, hey guys. Thanks everyone for watching. It was a good first episode, and we'll be back in the next week or two, apparently, depending on what our schedules look like. Other than that, guys, just subscribe to the YouTube. Make it easy on yourselves. Subscribe to the YouTube so you just don't fucking miss anything. All right, Jesus, don't be dummies. All right, bye everyone.